Chapter 1240. You can search Transmigration System. Adonis, come to Sashu. Com. On Baidu to find the S. So Su Yedwan had chosen to drug her, which meant that he did not want her life at all. Wei Bai could even guess Su Yedwan's motive. He must have finally suppressed more than just his feelings. He wanted to kidnap her and use her to threaten Ojinma. Wei Bai pondered over Su Yedwan's intentions and immediately got up to open the door. Anyway, she had to cooperate with Su Yedwan and squeeze his secret out of him. Opening the door, it was indeed Su Yedwan. He was wearing a thin black trench coat and a mask. Because his back was facing the corridor, he avoided all the blind spots. So he pulled down his mask. His face was a little pale and the darkness in his eyes was unusually deep. Wei, I'm sorry to disturb you so late at night. He was courteous and elegant. As Wei Bai was in a hurry, she did not wear shoes and her beautiful ankles were exposed. Her pink toes were cute. Su Yedwan lowered her head to take a look, then quietly moved her eyes away. She had an anxious expression. Dr. Su, why are you looking for me so late at night? Su Yedwan sighed. I just want to ask you one more time. Do you really not like me? Wei Bai seemed to be at a loss. She nervously crossed her arms and placed them on her abdomen. I'm sorry, we're really not suitable for each other. The person I like is Ojinma. Su Yedwan looked at her deeply and suppressed his voice. I know that you two really love each other. Wei Bai revealed a happy smile. I've never felt such beautiful feelings from a person. It's my fortune to be able to meet him. I can't torture you to death. Hurry up and tell me your little secret. As expected, Su Yedwan's face turned even paler. He was on the verge of collapsing. Finally, he could not help but say, Do you know? Actually, I got close to you in the beginning because of Ojinma. Wei Bai looked a little confused, as if she did not know what he was talking about. Do you know Ojinma? Su Yedwan smiled gently. I don't know him. To be exact, I'm a fan of his and a very fanatical one at that. He doesn't even know who I am. Wei Bai showed a look of understanding. What a coincidence, I'm also a fan of his. I came to this city because of him. Su Yedwan's expression did not change. He already knew that Wei Bai was Ojinma's fan. They were all his fans. However, their fates were completely different. Su Yedwan's smile turned cold. His fans didn't treat you well in the past. Wei Bai said, It's okay. Beating is a sign of affection. Scolding is a sign of love. Su Yedwan was speechless. Wei Bai grinned. Hurry up and reveal your true colors of jealousy. Activate your villain mode. She even revealed the secret of falling in love with Ojinma. How perverted could he be? Every time he didn't complete a side quest, there would be all kinds of weird punishments. Punishments? Wei Bai suddenly exploded. Wait, Tongzi, what's the punishment for this side quest? When she heard about the side quest, she was so busy completing the side quest that she didn't even think about it. What was the punishment for the side quest? The system was silent for a while before silently flipping through the side quest's punishment column. Then, it trembled and read aloud with a bitter face. Because it's the new year in the system world. Wei Bai was confused. So, the system said, It's the new year. Everyone is happy. Wei Bai said, So, the system said, There's no punishment. It's okay if you don't complete the side quest. If you complete it, you'll get a small red packet. You see, the system world is pretty good. Download the at https://m. Sashu.com at the bottom to record this chapter. You'll be able to see it next time when you open the bookshelf. If you like. Chapter 1241. Bai Wei spat out a mouthful of old blood. Without punishment, she would have to complete a side mission. What was a red packet? Was it as big as Yi Yuxuan's loving gaze? It was as stingy as the system realm. It probably only gave her 3 days' worth of life points to send her away. Wei Bai looked up at Su Yedwan and took a step back. Doctor, it's late. I'm going to rest. She slammed the door after she finished speaking. However, the door was blocked by a shoe, leaving a small gap. Behind the door, Su Yehuan's delicate and pretty face that had turned deathly pale appeared. Wei Wei, I'm sorry. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I used all my strength to put down Ojinma. Wei Wei Bai immediately said, I don't know what you're talking about. Su Yehuan's voice contained traces of a painful smile. Yes, you don't know anything. But I have to say that I put him down, but I don't have the strength to put you down anymore. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Wait, what did you say? Su Yehuan was a man after all. He was much stronger than Wei Wei Bai. He pushed the door open and grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm. He covered her mouth and nose with a handkerchief that was stained with drugs. Wei Wei Bai struggled and said to the system, Wait, what did he mean? The system said, It's like this. He was bent in the beginning. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The system said, Then you turned him straight. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Su Yehuan hugged her and stood there for a while. He then put on his mask and carried her out. Her body was soft and light. Dr. Su, who was carrying a woman for the first time, started to blush. Oh Jinma's new album was released. It went on sale just after midnight. He looked at the sales figures casually. When his album was released, there would be a rush to buy it. He was used to this. The number of albums increased rapidly, faster than any other album. There were 2 names on the cover of the album. It was his and Wei Wei Bai's. There were 4 songs in this album, all written by Wei Wei Bai. The Rest of My Life Has You song, and The Rest of My Life and You song replaced other songs at the last minute. It was directly placed in the position of the title track. Within an hour, the number of albums sold broke the record of the entire music industry. Although Ojinma was used to creating miracles by himself, it was a common occurrence. However, when he saw that the data was so good, he was still excited. After all, this was his and Wei Wei Bai's album. He picked up the phone and wanted to share this joy with Wei Wei Bai. But it occurred to him that she might be asleep. He didn't dare to disturb her and called the bodyguard. She hoped to hear something from the bodyguard. But after 3 calls, none of the 3 bodyguards picked up their phones. Ojinma looked at his phone with a gloomy expression. Suddenly, he jumped up and rushed out. When he arrived at Wei Wei Bai's rented apartment, he saw that the bodyguards he sent were all over the floor. The door was open. He walked in. He found that the lights were on and the blanket was lifted. He could even see where she was lying. But Wei Wei Bai was missing. Ojinma's heart sank. He even felt that he couldn't breathe. His fingers started to tremble. Something happened. Something happened to her. Su Yehuan lowered her head calmly and was cooking. The food was light. He knew that a singer's voice was very important. Heavy food would ruin the voice. She needed to take good care of it. Chapter 1242. Then he straightened the plate and walked into the room. He opened the wardrobe and walked to the basement. The lights were on in the basement and it was very bright. Ojinma's photo was casually removed and thrown into a box in a corner, and the photo on the wall turned into Bai Weiwei's. Su Yehuan walked down and saw Wei Wei Bai's photo on the wall. He couldn't help but smile happily. Then he kissed Wei Wei Bai's cheek in the photo. He was careful not to be too disrespectful. The carpet was very thick and the decor was very warm and simple. There was a couch with a round table and chairs with a soft shell. There was a bathroom, a small bookcase, a television, and a player. There were even baskets of fresh flowers hanging on the wall. On the east side of the basement was a soft bed that was more than 2 meters long. There were a few dolls that girls liked on it, and the pillows were fluffy and comfortable. The person sitting on the bed seemed to be a little frightened. Her bare feet were locked with iron chains. The iron chains were wrapped in cloth so that they wouldn't hurt anyone. Su Yehuan walked over and put the plate on the table. "It's time to eat, Sister Wei." Sister Wei. Wei Wei Bai looked at Su Yehuan expressionlessly. Su Yehuan didn't look sad at all. He smiled and said, "You eat first. I'm leaving." He knew that she would be nervous if he was here. If she was nervous, eating would be bad for her stomach. As a doctor, he knew very well how to keep her healthy. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything. She turned her head away as if she didn't want to see him. Su Yehuan stared blankly at her for a while. Then he suddenly walked over and touched her hair. Wei Wei Bai frowned and immediately said coldly, "What are you doing?" Su Yedwan immediately retracted his hand and was a little embarrassed. He stuttered, "No, nothing." After saying that, he immediately turned and ran away. After closing the wardrobe door, Su Yedwan covered his chest with his hands. So nervous, but so happy. Su Yedwan looked at his hands and blushed. He touched her hair. She touched her idol's hair. If it wasn't for the fact that cooking with dirty fingers might bring in germs and make Wei Wei Bai sick, he really wished he could not wash his hands for a year. When Wei Wei Bai saw Su Yedwan leave, she finally reached out her hand to support her forehead. She said, "Tongzi, I feel that my business is still not up to standard." The system asked, "Which part did you fail?" It felt that the host had passed all the tests. Who would use novice equipment to attack the great demon king? There had to be enough. She was the only one who had never failed. The host sighed. Wei Wei Bai was definitely the most awesome and stubborn host it had ever brought along. Wei Wei Bai sighed helplessly. "No, I'm still not abnormal enough." Wei Wei Bai, "If I'm abnormal enough, I wouldn't have failed to guess the little secret of that mentally ill Su Yedwan. What do you mean by like Ojinma? What homosexuality?" They were all terribly wrong. Su Yedwan did not have any romantic feelings for Ojinma. It was purely an idol-chasing feeling. By Wei Wei's side, "I should be more perverted, so that I can sympathize with this perverted world." The system. Sympathize with the abnormal world? What the hell was that? Wei Wei Bai, "I didn't think that Su Yedwan was purely an idol-chasing girl. This is his little secret." Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the side quest. You have found Su Yedwan's little secret. You are rewarded with a red packet for 3 days of life. Mwah! At the bottom to record your reading record. Chapter 1243. Wei Wei Bai, Scram. Screw your 3 days of life. Do you think I'm a beggar with this little island of life? Side reward. Because of the host's strong request, the red envelope of 3 days of life has been taken back. Wei Wei Bai. System. You see, the system realm is very humane. You say you don't want it and we take it back. Wei Wei Bai clutched her chest. She felt like she was going to die from anger. She picked up her food and ate it fiercely. Then she started to think about how to escape. The side mission was done. She only had a little bit of affinity left. She could go out and be sweet with Ojinma for a few days. And there were still a few months left. There was too much time. The prerequisite was that she could leave this place. This man, Su Yedwan, was one of those terrifying fanatical groupies that only existed in legends. He chased after idols to the point that they became his religion. He was the kind of fan who would give up everything to chase after them. This kind of fan was very rare and very scary. And Su Yedwan was the legendary VIP version of the fanatic fan. Chasing after idols did not count. He could not bear to have them taken away. He chased after Ojinma because of his angelic persona. But because Ojinma had never been in love. Su Yedwan was patient and had always been a hardcore fan. But when she appeared, Ojinma showed his true colors. He did not want to be an angel and had a bad temper. He showed his sharp side. For Su Yedwan, who had always chased after Ojinma's persona, this was the process of losing his fan. Then, accidentally, she came. She was as perfect as an angel. Su Yedwan transferred his fanaticism for Ojinma to her. In the end, he could not bear to see her dating Ojinma. So he tied her up. After tying her up, he put her on a pedestal and served her. She did not fight back, did not talk back, did not complain, did not dare to touch her. Even if he did, he would carefully touch her hair or her sleeves. He was so excited that his face turned red. And his requirements were very low. Don't date. Okay? Angels don't need to date. If the favorability level was not full yet. She was about to nod and agree. Su Yedwan, who did not get any response, was not angry. She continued to humbly serve her. Wei Wei Bai thought that she was indeed not perverted enough. That was why he couldn't fit in with the perverted Su Yedwan. Wei Wei Bai worriedly stuffed a prawn into her mouth. She wondered if Ojinma would have guessed that she had been caught by Su Yedwan. After all, Su Yetian had hidden himself so deeply that most people wouldn't be able to guess just how monstrous he was. Su Yehua followed the rules and went to work for the surgery. After finishing his work, he was eager to return home. There were papers and pens on his desk. He even bought a new guitar and placed it beside the bed. If Wei Wei Bai wanted to write a song, she could use it. When he thought of her obediently writing songs, he felt exceptionally happy. After returning to the house, he thought that Wei Wei Bai didn't know if she wanted to eat supper. So he immediately rolled up his sleeves to make supper. The supper didn't need to be big, but it had to be delicate and easy to digest. Otherwise, it would be difficult for her to fall asleep if she ate too much. Su Yehua was halfway through cooking when the doorbell rang. He looked up and a trace of vigilance flashed across his eyes. Then he went to open the door. It was actually the police. The police said, "It's like this. Do you know Wei Wei Bai?" Su Yehua said gently, "Yes, I used to be her doctor." The police said, "Did you know that she went missing?" Su Yehua was shocked. "I don't know. How did she go missing?" Chapter 1244. The police looked at him from head to toe and saw that his sleeves were rolled up and there were food residue on his fingers. "When was the last time you saw her?" Su Yehuan answered obediently. There were no loopholes. The police left after asking him the usual questions. Su Yehuan heaved a sigh of relief. After the police finished their questioning, they walked to the alley and turned the corner to the main road. A car appeared and a man with a cigarette in his hand leaned against the car door. His delicate and fair face had a dark and depressed expression in the smoke. He looked at the police coldly. "Did you see anything wrong?" The police shook his head. "What's wrong? It's so late and he's making supper." Ojinma suppressed the madness in his eyes. He forced himself to think calmly. "What supper?" The experienced police told him about the traces he had observed. From the residue on Su Yehuan's fingers, he guessed that there were two kinds of food. Ojinma looked at the alley coldly. His eyes were unreadable. He seemed to be relatively calm, but the hand holding the cigarette was trembling. If he knew who took Wei Wei Bai away, he would cut that person into pieces. Wei Wei Bai ate and slept well. Su Yehuan was too decent. When she gave him an autograph, he was so emotional that he almost cried. He took it and framed it. Wei Wei Bai's face was cold. Now that the side mission was completed, she was ready to escape. She observed her surroundings. Yes, the basement was impenetrable. Yes, the door lock was made of titanium alloy and the door was 5 centimeters thick. Was this like a bank vault? Yes, there were no communication devices. Don't underestimate a doctor. A doctor who could reach Su Yehuan's position was meticulous and logical. He thought about all aspects more than anyone else. She thought deeply for a while before saying to the system, "Do you think Su Yehuan will let me go if I seduce him?" The system thought deeply for a while. Su Yehuan's feelings for you are like a crazy fan. He worships you as an angel. Your status is not the same, so he doesn't have that kind of desire. Su Yehuan carefully touched Wei Wei Bai. It was just because he had met his idol. He was secretly happy that he did not wash his hands for a year. If Wei Wei Bai really seduced him, if you seduce him, he won't think that your idol image has collapsed and cry to silence you. Wei Wei Bai. It was possible. She had to be careful in this perverted world. "What's Ojinma doing now?" The system replied, "He's been looking for you like crazy. He's so famous now that he's suspicious of a lot of interest groups, including Su Yeting." Bai Weiwei touched her chin. "Where's my cat?" "Oh, you." Meanwhile, Su Yehuan had also opened the door and silently appeared. Seeing that she had fallen asleep, he pulled the blanket over her tightly. Wei Wei Bai's sleeping face was cute and soft. Her face was slightly red. She looked like a pure angel. Angels were not allowed to fall in love. Su Yehuan's plan was to wait until Ojinma knew that he could not find her and give up on their relationship. He would let her go out and continue singing. Then he would be her fan for life. Su Yehuan smiled happily. Then she reached out and gently stroked Wei Wei Bai's hair. Download the at https://m. Sashu. com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click Save at the bottom to record this chapter. You can see it the next time you open your bookshelf. If you like. Chapter 1245. After touching it, he immediately retracted his hand and turned to leave. Touching his idol's hair, he really wanted to show it off. System. Pervert. Wei Wei Bai spread her 4 short legs and ran on the road in the middle of the night. The big-faced cat was dirty all over. Its face looked even more haggard and its fur was dirty. It was already ugly enough, but now it was even uglier. Probably ran to ask for food from passers-by, and if it failed to act cute, it would probably be kicked away. Where did this ugly cat come from? Scram, scram, scram. This was how Wei Wei Bai felt when her own big-faced cat went through the trash. Oh, Jinma was still in her rented apartment, and she heard that he was in a bad mood. She had to find him quickly so that he could save her. Wei Wei Bai saw her apartment. The door was closed, but the lights were on. She snuck in through the window. She saw Oh Jinma's back facing her. He sat on the chair and touched her pillow. His hair was a little messy, and his delicate and handsome face had a hint of gloominess. There were a few phones beside him, as if he was waiting for news. Suddenly, he looked up and saw the big-faced cat squatting by the window. Oh Jinma's eyes flashed with surprise, but it was replaced by disappointment. He was not even in the mood to care about this ugly cat. Without Wei Wei Bai, what was the use of this ugly cat? Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "Fairy tales are all lies." System. Question mark. Wei Wei Bai. What happened to true love? Even if you turned into a pig, the male lead would still be able to see it. The system said, "Read less of those unrealistic things." Wei Wei Bai jumped down from the window and pulled out a piece of paper from the ground. Then, she pulled the pen and pulled. It was so fun. Why couldn't she hold the pen? Wei Wei Bai's cat face was embarrassed. She shook her head left and right anxiously. Where did the ink go? Before she finished shaking, she was lifted by the neck. Oh Jinma stared at her blankly, as if he was examining something. Wei Wei Bai looked at him with round eyes, as if she wanted to tell him something. Suddenly, Oh Jinma whispered, "Are you Wei Wei?" Wei Wei Bai. No, how could he tell? The system said, "So this is true love." Wei Wei Bai. Is this true love? This is a cheat, right? Oh Jinma looked at her teary eyes. Her ugly face, he didn't know why it looked so cute. If you are, blink. Wei Wei Bai could not help but blink. Actually, it was not his words, but her instinct. Oh Jinma froze and looked at her in disbelief. He seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly opened the cabinet and took out the ink bottle. He opened the ink bottle and said to Wei Wei Bai, "If you are Wei Wei, then write down what is 1 + 1. Wei Wei Bai. Did Oh Jinma think that after she turned into a cat, her IQ would be on par with that of a cat? She looked at him with disdain. She dipped her claws in the ink and wrote, "Suye." The words looked like scribbles, but it was barely visible. Oh Jinma's eyes turned cold. "Suye." Bai Wei Wei laboriously wrote, "Basement." Oh Jinma repeated, "Suye kidnapped you and locked you in the basement?" He stared at her blankly. Wei Wei Bai wrote again, "I am a cat demon, not Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai wrote too many words. In the end, it was all a mess. Oh Jinma looked at her deeply. After a few seconds, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Yes, you are a cat demon." He had turned into a cat before. Of course, he knew that she didn't want him to find out how she felt. At the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1246. Because she was too cowardly. Oh Jinma reached out and pulled her into his arms. Then he reached out and caressed her gently. He had a gentle expression on his face. "It's okay now. Don't be afraid." Then he made a call and asked them to keep an eye on Su Yedwan. He was going to break down the door to capture Su Yedwan and then rescue Wei Wei Bai from the basement. After doing all this, he saw the haggard big-faced cat. Her ugly face immediately became cute and beautiful in his eyes. She became the most beautiful cat in the world. Oh Jinma said, "I'll give you a bath and then I'll give you some dried fish to eat." Wei Wei Bai's face was cold and she didn't say anything. Oh Jinma smiled. He knew that it was her first time turning into a cat, so she might not be used to it. He carried the soft-haired woman into the bathroom. Then he soaped her up and used warm water to wash her hair. The big-faced cat had been wandering around for the past few days. He was afraid that she would starve. Wei Wei Bai was in a daze as he rubbed her with a smile. After washing her clean, Jinma dried her fur. He saw that there was still some fear in her eyes, as if she didn't know why she had turned into a cat. Her cat face was drooping and listless. Her eyes were narrowed and the corners of her mouth were drooping. Jinma's heart felt like it was being squeezed. He took out a packet of dried fish and fed it to her. Wei Wei Bai was very stubborn. No matter how hungry she was, she wouldn't eat it. She slapped the dried fish away from his hand. Her round cat face was full of disdain. She used her cat claws to push away the dried fish beside her feet. She wouldn't eat it even if she was beaten to death. Anyway, she wasn't hungry when she woke up. Wait until she returned to her body. The big-faced cat would eat it if she wanted to. She wasn't as spineless as Jinma, who ate the dried fish as soon as she saw it. Jinma's heart raced. He felt that the big-faced cat had become super cute. She was the cutest in the world. He wanted to hug her and rub her, kiss her. Just as he thought about it, he did it. He hugged her and smiled like a fool. Eat more, you're not hungry. You're a cat now, so you can't eat human food. It'll be very uncomfortable if you have a stomachache. Wei Wei Bai's ears were flattened by him. Jinma leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Wei Wei Bai, damn pervert. She was on the same level as Su Yekuan. His phone suddenly rang. Jinma quickly answered the call. He hugged Wei Wei Bai tightly with one hand. He fled? Jinma immediately stood up with the cat in his arms and rushed out. Follow him, but don't get too close. Wei Wei is still in the car. Su Yedan fled, taking Bai Wei Wei with her. And Wei Wei Bai had turned into a cat, which meant that Wei Wei was asleep. He had experience in turning into a cat, so he knew that if the body woke up, the soul in the cat would return to the body. Generally speaking, when Su Yai carried Bai Wei Wei around, she should wake up on her own. So Bai Wei Wei must have been drugged with sleeping pills or drugged with drugs. Jinma got into the car and immediately stepped on the accelerator. Wei Wei Bai squatted between his legs, looking like a cat that had no love left. The system said, Su Yehuan is very vigilant, so she drugged you, put you in the car and fled. Wei Wei Bai said, I don't understand why someone would chase after a celebrity to such an extent. Not only did they kidnap her, they even worshipped her with 3 sticks of incense after getting her autograph. This was something that she saw occasionally. Su Yehuan bowed piously to her signature. This had a huge impact on her worldview, although she did not have much worldview. But this did not stop her from eating whales. // to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click Save at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1247. The system said, Love to the extreme. It's crazy. Jinma followed his own car. A group of well-trained bodyguards surrounded Su Yeting's car. Wei Wei Bai watched from the front window, thinking that Su Yeting would be forced to stop. Jinma's car followed in the middle. He was not in a hurry, but his eyelashes were trembling, and his eyes were as cold as ice. There was no trace of his usual good mood. He calmly watched as Su Yeting's car was surrounded. He immediately ordered, Force him to stop. Su Yeting had no way of escaping, so he mobilized more than 20 cars. Even if the police had to be alerted, he had to catch Su Yeting. Then he would beat him up until he could not take care of himself. The 3 cars in front approached Su Yeting at the same time. The scene was extremely thrilling. Wei Wei Bai watched without any emotion. Jinma glanced at her. He saw her obediently lying in front of the car window, soft and round. Her ears were even trembling, as if she was frightened by the cars. Jinma thought, how could she be so cute? Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 97. A question mark appeared above Bai Wei Wei's head. How did the favorability increase? The system said, it's to act cute. Wei Wei Bai thought, this cat is so ugly that it makes people hate it. How is it cute? Suddenly, There was a loud crash in front of them. Oh Jinma's eyes narrowed as he saw Su Yeting's car crash into the railing. Outside the railing was a relatively short and steep sea cliff. "Stop him!" Oh Jinma shouted. But it was too late. Su Yeting's car crashed into the cliff and fell into the water. All the cars stepped on the brakes. Oh Jinma pulled open the car door, carried Wei Wei by, and rushed to the broken railing. The assistant and bodyguards rushed up at the same time. "Call someone to send a car to salvage it." Oh Jinma's eyes turned red and he kicked the railing. Wei Wei fell into the sea. The car had fallen into the pit in one piece. The airtight compartment of the car allowed the people inside to hold on for a while. But soon, the car began to sink into the water. Wei Wei would suffocate to death. He picked up Wei Wei Bai and looked into her cat eyes. He said seriously and gently, "Xiao Hua, I'm going to save you. You stay here, okay?" Floret. It was her childhood nickname. Wei Wei Bai was shocked by this tacky name. Then she meowed. There was no need for her to go down. She would be saved as soon as her favorability rose to 100. It was almost impossible to save someone in this situation. Oh Jinma was just a singer. His body was built from training in the gym. Was he looking for death by getting off the car? It meowed softly as if it was encouraging him. Oh Jinma placed Wei Wei Bai in his assistant's hands. "Remember, she is your ancestor. Serve her well. If anything happens to me, all my assets will be hers." The assistant was dumbfounded. "Huh? What the hell?" Oh Jinma had no time to waste. He threw his jacket away and grabbed a metal pipe that had spilled out from the railing. He plunged headfirst into the water. The sea cliff was very low, but the waves were turbulent. They could almost see the spot where the car had fallen into the water. Oh Jinma jumped down without hesitation. When the assistant came back to his senses, his legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. "Quick! Save him! Save him!" The right thing to do was to save Oh Jinma. If Wei Wei Bai died, the company could bear the loss. But if Oh Jinma were to die, then Sanxing Company would close down immediately. Crossover system. "Adonis, come here." Crossover system. "Adonis, come here." / crossover system. "Adonis, come here." Download crossover system. "Adonis, come here." Mobile crossover system. "Adonis, come here." Chapter 1248. The assistant was probably dead. The professional bodyguards did not want to go into the water. After all, they might not be able to save the person. However, if Oh Jinma jumped in, the situation would be different. If Oh Jinma died, they would not be able to withstand Sanxing's revenge. The bodyguards who knew how to swim also jumped in to search for the person, mainly looking for Oh Jinma. Wei Wei Bai and the assistant sat on the ground in a daze, looking at the dark sea. The notification of the favorability rating came. Ding, the male lead's favorability rating is at 99. Oh Jinma was not dead yet. According to Wei Wei Bai's experience, if he really failed to save the person, he would be on the verge of death. The favorability rating would go up to 100. Therefore, as long as she did not do anything, she could basically complete the mission. The system said, "He is very dangerous. This part of the sea is full of submerged reefs. It would be hard for people to come back up." This was also the reason why the professional bodyguards did not want to jump in to save Oh Jinma before he went in. It was almost impossible to save him. They might even lose their lives. Wei Wei Bai frowned. "Is there anything that can let Oh Jinma come up safely? As for me, even if my body is dead, can I continue as long as I am in the cat?" The system said, "Yes, you can continue, but as a cat, it would be hard for you to reach 100. Wei Wei Bai said, "As long as I am not a bacterium, I can succeed no matter what I become." The contempt of the conqueror. The system coughed. "There is something on sale that can save Oh Jinma's life." Wei Wei Bai said, "What is it?" The system cleared its throat. "Sea God's Prayer. The Sea God's Prayer that guarantees that you will be safe even if you are thrown into the Mariana Trench. It is now on sale, not 999, only 99 HP. Hurry up and call the hotline 747-474-174 to bring it home. Bring it home. Wei Wei Bai said, I've been wanting to ask you this for a long time. Do you get paid every time you do this kind of advertisement? The system said, you'll get a participation award, a Rujiamo, and a pack of durian-flavored instant noodles if you're lucky. Wei Wei Bai covered its round face with its paws. Why was her family so poor? Buy it. Let him live. Wei Wei Bai heard her own voice. Surprisingly, she didn't feel any heartache over her 99 HP. He clearly knew that even if he gave up so much HP, the final reward would not even be a third of the current reward. But he still did it. The system bought the prayer of the sea god and threw it into the sea. It accurately hit Ojinma. Ojinma, who was in the sea, was pulled down by the dark tide. He was not very good at swimming, but he remembered that Wei Wei Bai's body was in the car. Even if he didn't know how to swim, he would still jump down. He suddenly opened his eyes and felt an explosive power surge out from his body. He actually saw the car. Wei Wei, he immediately swam over. He was so anxious that he didn't even think about when his swimming skills improved. He smashed the car window with the metal pipe in his hand and opened the back door. Su Yedwan was sitting in the driver's seat. He had already fainted. Wei Wei Bai was lying in the back seat. Ojinma wanted to give Su Yedwan a few more pipes so that he would die a horrible death. But Wei Wei Bai was more important. He hugged her. She closed her eyes and quietly lay in his arms. Ojinma's heart clenched. He was afraid that she would stop breathing, so he immediately kissed her lips and passed his breath to her. At the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1249. Then he held onto her waist and swam upwards. He kissed her as he swam, so that she would not lack oxygen. Ojinma felt that a person's desire to survive in the face of adversity was really scary. He actually felt that he could swim across the entire Pacific Ocean without panting. What a scary illusion. Wei Wei Bai and the assistant stayed by the side of the road, while the bodyguards swam up from the sea. Because the tide was too big, they could not find him at all. Also, it was dark and there was no light, so they could not be sure where he was. The assistant hugged by Wei Wei and cried, How can you die? Ah, Mogu. No matter who dies, you can't die. Ah. How can I go out in the future? I will be executed by your fans. Ojinma's fans were crazy. It was not like he did not know, and Kenshing would not let him off. Brother Mo, how can you die? The assistant hugged the cat and cried with all his might. As he cried, he suddenly realized that on the beach below the cliff, there was a slender black figure slowly walking up from the sea. The assistant trembled and his eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately shouted, Hurry up! Where are the lights? The lights immediately shone down and the man on the beach looked up. His entire body was wet, and his delicate and handsome face had a sickly and pale look because he had been soaked in the sea. His thin lips had lost some of their red color, but it did not affect the color of his face. He was so beautiful that he looked like a god who had walked out from the sea. Ojinma hugged Wei Wei Bai and walked up quickly. After reaching the shore, the tiredness and discomfort came back. Wei Wei Bai lay quietly on his chest, her breathing still there. He was so excited that he did not know what to do. The bodyguards rushed up. The ambulance and traffic police also arrived, and the sound of brakes could be heard. Ojinma walked to the road under the protection of the bodyguards. He hugged her and saw the cat beside the assistant. Wei Wei, I found you, he said softly, revealing a gentle and dazzling smile. Then he fell backward and the bodyguards immediately protected him. The medical staff rushed over and put them on stretchers. That night was exceptionally chaotic, but the news was tightly sealed. The higher-ups of Canqing were mobilized to stop the reporters and mediate the situation. Before the matter of Su Yehuan was fully investigated, everyone agreed to keep the news of these two people to themselves. Bai Weiwei was also carried into the ambulance, and then fell asleep in a daze. Ojinma did not die, and his affinity with her remained. She sighed in relief, therefore she slept soundly. When she woke up, she was in a bright room. It was a ward. Moreover, it was a special ward. A man sat by the bed and stared blankly at the bed. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Why was Jinma sitting there? She was behind him? Why didn't he change back? Wei Wei Bai realized that she had not changed back at all. She thought that she would directly return to her own body when she woke up. She was too shocked and meowed. Jinma immediately turned around and frowned. His eyes were filled with anxiety. He glanced at the cat and then at Wei Wei Bai. Suddenly, he stood up in shock and immediately rushed in front of Wei Wei Bai. He carried her and asked carefully, "Wei Wei." Although Wei Wei Bai did not want to admit it, she still nodded unwillingly and meowed softly. Jinma was silent for a while before saying, "You can't go back, right?" When he turned into a cat, he would always go back when his body woke up. // Chapter 1250. She had been asleep for almost a day. The doctor also said that there was nothing wrong with her body, but her head had been hit. Although they couldn't find any blood clots, they couldn't rule out other hidden dangers. They could only wait for her to wake up. This sentence was the main point of the doctor's statement. Jinma carried Wei Wei Bai home. He helped her pack her things. There was a box of manuscript and some of her things. "I'll put these manuscripts in the safe for you. Don't trust others so carelessly in the future. If you don't have the manuscripts, how can you prove that you wrote the songs yourself?" Jinma sat on the floor and organized the sheet music that he had collected from Wei Wei Bai's rented apartment. Wei Wei Bai squatted beside him obediently. She watched as he carefully organized the songs and spoke gently to her. She looked at him curiously, then stared blankly at the songs she had written. She reached out her paw to touch the paper. She realized that she couldn't pick it up. Wei Wei Bai looked annoyed. She lifted her paw and looked at it in a daze. Jinma immediately laid on the floor and faced her directly. It was as if he had matured overnight. That violent and dark feeling had disappeared, and he still had that innocent and childish face of his. He also had the unique charm of a mature man. "Wei Wei Bai." Jinma's eyes seemed to be shining. Bai Wei Wei raised her cat face to look at him. Her ears drooped, and her soft fur drooped down. She seemed to have become a bereaved cat. Jinma smiled and said, "It's okay. Even if you become a cat, you will still be my favorite Wei Wei Bai." His words were surprisingly serious. His affection for her had always been at 99 and had never dropped. Even if her body was in a vegetative state, she still lived in a cat's body. He didn't waver at all. He was still full of emotions. Wei Wei Bai didn't have any resistance to being a cat. She was against being such an ugly cat. Although the big-faced cat's face was no longer so obtrusive after she put on some weight, she was still not beautiful. For Wei Wei Bai, she wanted to become a Persian cat. At least she was pretty. Jinma saw that her ears were still drooping, and her amber cat eyes were full of pitiful sadness. He couldn't help but kiss her cheek. "Don't be afraid. I'll take care of you for the rest of your life." Wei Wei Bai finally looked up. Her ears perked up as she cautiously approached him. Jinma did not move, afraid that he would scare her. In the end, Wei Wei Bai rubbed her cat face against his hair. It was so soft. When the big-faced cat was him, he felt that it was an ugly cat. But Wei Wei Bai accidentally wore it inside. He looked at the cat. No matter how he looked at it, it was cute, beautiful, and unique. Jinma felt that it was time for her to mature. Otherwise, Wei Wei Bai would become a cat and her body would become a vegetable. Who would protect him? Jinma moved Wei Wei Bai home with a set of medical equipment. He carried the cat and ran up and down to learn about nursing. He didn't bother to do what he could. Nursing a vegetable was very tiring, but Jinma felt blessed. He knew that she was just tired. When she wasn't tired anymore, she would return to the body. She would be able to return from the cat's body, and he would tell her that everything was ready. He was just waiting for her to wake up. He would kneel down and propose, raising a cat and nursing Wei Wei Bai, tormenting Jiang Ro and Jiang La. If Su Yehua hadn't drowned, the first person he would torture would have been him. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 1251. Su Yehuan had also found out that this man had an obsessive-compulsive disorder. He especially yearned for beautiful things. Jinma was also a fan of Su Yehuan because of his angelic persona. She thought of her photo being worshipped by people every day. Jinma was silent for a long time. He felt that he was indeed not perverted enough to understand such a scary fan. Even if he was perverted, he was only perverted towards Wei Wei Bai. Unlike Su Yehuan, who saw his angelic persona crumble. She immediately became a fan of Wei Wei Bai and stopped the two of them from dating. He had actually embarked on the criminal path of imprisonment. He even caused Wei Wei Bai to be unable to return to her body. Jinma wanted to drag this pervert out and whip his corpse. Anyway, he did everything in an orderly manner. Wei Wei Bai turned into a cat and was his spiritual support. To prevent others from finding it strange, he called Wei Wei Bai a cat as Xiaohua. Many times, he would point at himself and say to Wei Wei Bai, "You can call me Big Tree." He even changed his Weibo name. He was called Big Tree. He even changed Wei Wei Bai's Weibo name to Xiaohua. Big Tree and Xiaohua. The fans all said that this nickname was too cute. Jiang La's matter started to be exposed. The man she cheated on was a singer who was no longer popular. Under Jinma's control, that man started to expose what happened back then on Weibo. He even said that Jiang La seduced him in a good posture. After eating such a big melon, everyone immediately looked up the singer's information. They found that the male singer looked similar to Jiang Ro. It was not surprising that people in the entertainment industry looked similar to each other. But it had just been exposed that Jiang Ro had cheated on him, so it was almost certain that Jiang La was his daughter. Just as everyone was guessing, Jinma directly posted on Weibo, confirming that Jiang Ro was not his sister. It was a certificate of paternity testing. There was no blood relation between him and Jiang Ro. Jiang Ro was forced to delete all her Weibo posts and disappear from everyone's sight. And because Jiang La had lost everything, she went to find trouble with that male singer. In the end, she was disfigured by him. After the biggest melon was eaten, only the marshmallows were left. Everyone happily stuffed dog food into the big tree and the little flower's mouth. But slowly, the fans and netizens found out. Jinma had not appeared in a long time and Wei Wei Bai had not even updated her Weibo. As for Su Yehua's matter, after the investigation was completed, Su Yehua's expression changed drastically. The news also began to report. On the night of the news report, Jinma posted on Weibo. His hand was tightly holding onto a slender, fair hand. It was a simple photo. His Weibo was, "No matter how long it takes, a lifetime is fine. I'll wait for you to wake up." Only then did the fans find out that Wei Wei Bai had become a vegetable because of this unfortunate accident. And Jinma had been waiting for her for 3 months. 3 months. It was not a long time. It was short and heavy. From then on, Jinma stopped all commercial activities and the promotion of his new album. There was also no celebration party for the album's sales. He gave all his time to his little flower. The favorability level remained at 99. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "Are you sure I want to stay in the cat's body until the strategy is complete?" The system said, "Before you go back, your soul will leave your body and return to your body in a short time before you die." Wei Wei Bai said, "How do I die in this world?" The system said, "Because your long-term death method is different from the one given by the main system. The main system is too lazy to waste time arranging your death method and just let you die." The read the at https://www.sashu.com/the read the at https://www.sashu.com/ and read the at https://www.sashu.com the and read the at https://m sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. The comma. Chapter 1252. Wei Wei Bai. Do you have to be so casual? This is too casual. Time passed slowly. In 1 year's time, there were 4 seasons. Wei Wei Bai's body lay in bed for 3 seasons. Jinma's Weibo became cat bashing. The words on his Weibo were about taking care of Wei Wei Bai. He recorded these things for Wei Wei Bai to see. He wanted to let Wei Wei Bai feel his love and the love of his fans. This way, she would not be afraid and panic. After all, she had turned into a cat and could only eat small dried fish. She must be very sad. Oh, Jinma even said carefully, "Actually, I turned into a cat before." Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. Was it that great? She had turned into a cat too. Of course, there was still a reaction. Wei Wei Bai looked at him with a hint of surprise. Under Oh Jinma's careful protection, her fur was beautiful. Although her face was still a little big, she was already very cute. That was why not just people with money could be beautiful. Cats could be beautiful too. Oh Jinma reached out and held her face gently. "At that time, you picked me up and brought me home to raise me." Wei Wei Bai stared at him. She seemed to have thought of something and looked at him with disdain. Oh Jinma blushed. "I didn't see anything." She had seen everything when she was bathing him. Wei Wei Bai sneered. What he said revealed 300 taels of silver. Oh Jinma knew that he was not persuasive. He could only say, "So when you turned into a cat, I brought you home to raise you. Are we a match made in heaven?" After all, he was the only one who had such a magical experience with Wei Wei Bai. Oh Jinma felt that they were a match made in heaven. Wei Wei Bai nodded her head shamelessly. Oh Jinma laughed, but his favorability didn't increase. Wei Wei Bai. Half a year had passed, and it was almost time for the strategy quest. Oh Jinma was stuck in 99 and refused to budge. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a moment before she finally lowered her bottom line. She decided to use her cat body to tempt Oh Jinma. If a gentle strategy wasn't enough, a seductive strategy would definitely be more than enough. Hence, when Oh Jinma was sleeping, she would stay by his side with a serious expression. Then she forced out a seductive cat smile. Her round cat body was lying on its side, one leg over the other. Then it used its front paw to support its body and used its other paw to gently stroke its own fur. Oh Jinma had just finished washing Wei Wei Bai's body and was tucking her in. The bed had been remodeled and was especially large. The outermost area was where Wei Wei Bai's body was sleeping. All the medical equipment was placed beside her. The middle was where Oh Jinma slept. And in Oh Jinma's arms was the cat, Wei Wei Bai. After he tucked her in, he saw Wei Wei Bai's face sink. Wei Wei Bai looked like she had nothing to live for. Her paws were too weak and couldn't even maintain a seductive posture. She looked at Oh Jinma in a daze. Oh Jinma didn't think much of it. He carried her up, placed her in front of his chest, and kissed her cat ears. "Go to sleep, little darling." Wei Wei Bai trembled. It was so mushy, but she still closed her eyes and fell asleep. After such a long time, she had gotten used to being surrounded by his scent. A year was about to pass. System notification: "You have to leave tomorrow." If she didn't succeed by tomorrow, she would have failed. With a favorability of 99, Bai Wei Wei exhausted all methods. Even the most disdainful act of acting cute rushed up. But it was useless. Wei Wei Bai was in despair. She hugged her cat head and said, "Don't worry about me. Let me be alone." Chapter 1253. The system said, "Just accept your fate as a cat. Oh Jinma likes you with breasts and buttocks, not a round cat like you." For the past year, Wei Wei Bai had been fed by Oh Jinma until she was chubby and very cute. However, Wei Wei Bai refused to look in the mirror. She had never put on weight before. She hated dried fish. Wei Wei Bai hugged her head and thought for a while. "There's no other way. I can only give him a big strategy before we leave tomorrow and make him give me 100%. The system asked, "What strategy?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Seduce him." The system was speechless. Oh Jinma put on some nice clothes for Wei Wei Bai and planned to bring her out to get some sun. Of course, the cat had to come along too. The family of 3, 2, neatly lined up together. He saw that the cat was still curled up and sleeping quietly. After turning into a cat, Wei Wei Bai was lazy, short-tempered, and loved to sleep. Oh Jinma smiled dotingly and went up to carry her. However, one hand gently hooked onto the corner of his shirt. Oh Jinma froze in his steps and stopped breathing. He did not dare to turn around, afraid that he would be disappointed again. However, he heard a familiar and gentle voice. "Jinma, I'm awake." Oh, Jinma turned around and saw Wei Wei Bai leaning on the bed, looking up at him with a smile. His fingers were trembling and his expression was stiff. He stared at her without letting go. She was still too thin. No matter how hard he tried, he could not make her fat again. Oh, Jinma's eyes became misty. His eyes reddened as he reached out and gently touched her pale face. Wei Wei Bai moved her hands and legs. Although the system said that there were no major problems with her body after special treatment. She even had the physical strength of a normal person. However, she had not felt a human body for a long time and was still unfamiliar with it. Oh, Jinma finally confirmed that she was awake. His intense emotions surged out in an instant. Unable to control himself, he immediately reached out and hugged her tightly. Wei, you're awake. He was too agitated. His mature appearance was gone, and he only felt aggrieved and uncomfortable. I've always been afraid that you won't be able to return to your body. A cat's lifespan is too short. I'm so afraid that I'm about to have nightmares. He was not a fool. It was not a good thing for Wei Bai to become a cat. This was because the lifespan of a cat was much shorter than that of a human. What was even more frightening was that the big-faced cat was actually an old cat. Its lifespan was limited. Wei Bai heard the countdown timer. He was leaving in an hour. Her pale fingertips gently stroked his back and said, Jinma, let go of me. Oh, Jinma immediately let go. Did I hurt you? In the next second, his eyes were softly covered by a kiss. His tears also fell onto her lips. Oh, Jinma was pushed onto the bed by her two hands with a light strength. She slowly climbed onto his body. Her long hair was still black and beautiful, and the strands fell onto his body. Oh, Jinma lay on the bed. His white neck and Adam's apple could be seen at the collar of his shirt. He suppressed his voice and said, Wei, get down. Wei Bai sat on his body and casually hooked her fingers around his collar. Then, she pulled open his buttons and exposed his collarbone. His Adam's apple moved a few times. His muscles started to tense up. Wei, you just woke up. You can't do this kind of thing. He could tell that she was trying to kill him. She was tormenting him like this. Moreover, he had not been relieved for a year. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. The is at https://m.sashu.com//. Chapter 1254. Oh, Jinma turned around and saw her fall softly into his arms. At first, he thought that she was just tired and fell asleep. But he suddenly realized that it was impossible for a person to be so active after sleeping for a year. Her muscles had more or less atrophied, so she couldn't be as active as she was. She suddenly woke up as if she had a final burst of lucidity. Oh, Jinma hugged her and stared blankly at the cat on the bed. The cat was dead. The system hugged Wei Bai's soul and ran back. In this world, it had been a full year, and it realized that the emotional stripper was loose for a moment, so it had to use a screwdriver to fix it for a while. Fortunately, it was fixed before Wei Bai's emotions ran out, or else she would have been in pain. As for Yi Yuxuan's pain, that was his problem. The system was still worried about Yi Yuxuan's emotions in the previous worlds, but now its thoughts were on Wei Bai. Suddenly, the system stopped and looked up coldly. The huge golden wheel of fate was filled with golden powder. The needle in the middle of the wheel of fate was placed steadily at the position it wanted. But a terrifying force from an unknown source started to slowly change the needle's position. Although the position was not obvious, it was enough to make the system scared. It hurriedly extended its bone-white fingertips and gently moved the changed position back to its original position. With it here, no one should be deluded enough to think that they could tamper with Bai Weiwei's fate. However, when the system's hand touched the pointer of destiny, an extremely cold voice rang out, shattering the system's actions. Found it! After this voice, a golden ribbon suddenly appeared from the dark and boundless space. It wrapped around the system's hand. The system protected Wei Bai's soul with one hand and scolded through gritted teeth. Fuck you! Yi Yuxuan, awakening my ass, don't kill my host, turned its wrist and the ribbon broke. A scorching red flame burned away the power of the ribbon. With such a small amount of awakened soul, it was not qualified to touch Wei Wei Bai's soul in front of it. No matter what, it was still the big boss that everyone in the system world called Fourth Brother. The host it was protecting was not just the Chosen One, but also the Chosen One. Even if the main system came, it would not give up. Although the power of the ribbon was destroyed, the needle's position was still loose. The system endured the pain and was about to dial back. However, he discovered that the soul channel was beginning to shatter. The system glanced at the fate roulette unwillingly. It carried the clueless Wei Wei Bai and sped towards the end of the tunnel. Its body began to crumble in the next round. Sure enough, the system couldn't go against the destined genius. Every time it clashed with Yi Yuxuan, it had to shrink back. He had already tortured Yi Yuxuan to this extent. How could this man be so resilient? He was actually beginning to awaken. The system carefully placed Wei Wei Bai's soul back into her body. There was a terrifying power surging in the room. The system glanced and found that Yi Yuxuan was lying on the bed asleep. Under the bed, there was a faint golden light flowing. Suddenly, Yi Yuxuan seemed to feel something. He slowly opened his eyes. His black pupils stretched out and a few golden patterns appeared. The patterns were like the pattern on the fate roulette. The system rolled and crawled back to its trash can to prevent its existence from being exposed. Yi Yuxuan blinked and felt unusually sleepy. His head was a little dizzy. Chapter 12:55. It was as if he didn't know where he was. He didn't know when his hand reached out, as if he wanted to grab something. He wanted to grab something. The gold in his eyes disappeared, and his mind still couldn't find an answer. Only a small part of his soul had been awakened, and he couldn't remember what he had done. But the dream of that cat still existed, although he was already very familiar with this kind of dream. But every time he lost her, he still couldn't bear it. Yi Yuxuan reached out and held her finger. The warm sensation made his cold brows loosen a little. It's been 3 days, she should wake up today. Yi Yuxuan rationally calculated the time when she woke up. He saw her eyelashes tremble, and the pain in her chest started to ease. Her eyes slowly opened, and there was still sleepiness in them. Yi Yuxuan silently sighed in relief. Every time he woke up from his dream, he was afraid that she would become the her in his dream. Once he fell asleep, he wouldn't wake up. And Wei Wei Bai's first reaction when she woke up was to check her life points. In the end, the system disappeared without a sound. Wei Wei Bai was puzzled, and she seemed to see something from the corner of her eyes. She turned her head in a daze, and a handsome and cold face appeared beside her. Yi Yuxuan had just slept for a while, and his originally neat short hair was a little messy. He looked at her indifferently, and his eyes were like bottomless abyss, but strangely gave people a feeling of gentleness. "You're awake." His voice was a little hoarse, and he couldn't help but smile. This smile was simply against the rules, and it crashed into the depths of Wei Wei Bai's heart. She took a deep breath and ordered her heart not to overdrive. When she woke up, she saw a handsome face smiling at her. She was about to lose control of her evil thoughts. Thinking about her heart disease, she finally forced herself to calm down. "This place is..." Wei Wei Bai looked at the room blankly. This room was especially black, gray, and white, and the design was classy and smooth, but there was no trace of femininity. It was full of a postmodern design style. Cold, simple, and beautiful. That was her first impression of the room. Yi Yuxuan seemed to see her confusion and said lightly, "This is my house in the center of the city. You slept for 3 days, so I moved you here." Wei Wei Bai propped herself up and looked up at him. "What do you mean by moving here?" "Yi Yuxuan, I'll take good care of you. I spend most of my time in the city and have a lot of work. It's more suitable for you to live here." "Oh, right?" He paused quietly for a moment before saying, "Father-in-law also agrees." Father-in-law also agreed? Wei Wei Bai refused to believe it. "My dad won't agree. We have nothing to do with each other." She had already rejected marriage. Moreover, Bai Changyan had also given up on doing business with the Yi family and was content to be a middle-level merchant. Therefore, Bai Changyan would never agree to Yi Yuxuan moving her away. Yi Yuxuan's voice was low and gentle with a hint of coaxing sweetness. He agreed. I told him that I'm still very innocent. I've never had a girlfriend before, and I haven't even had any physical contact with other women. Even when women pounced on him occasionally, he would pull them away and throw them away at the first moment. Wei Wei Bai was confused. What did this have to do with her father's agreement? Yi Yuxuan pretended to frown in distress. So you were the one who taught me how to kiss for the first time. You were the one who gave me a hug for the first time. You were also the one who saw me naked for the first time. The first time I was crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration System. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m.sashu.com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click Save at the bottom to record this reading. Quick comma. Chapter 1256. What was it? Other than touching, kissing, and hugging, there was nothing else. Yi Yuxuan pretended to be helpless. He sighed pretentiously. After saying all this, father-in-law directly asked me to move you away, saying that he wanted to be responsible for me. I refused, but I was embarrassed, so I moved you away. Wei Wei Bai. Seeing her like this, Yi Yuxuan was afraid that she wouldn't believe him, so he picked up his phone and called Bai Changyan. The call was quickly connected. When Bai Changyan heard that Wei Wei Bai was awake, he said happily, Wei Wei, Dad is going to find a second love. Comfort Xian well. He's a pure and good child. Even if you want to reject him, you have to be gentle. He gave his first time to you. Wei Wei Bai. What first time? What second love? She just slept for 3 days, and the world turned upside down again. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She held back her doubts and asked, Dad, what does a second love mean? Bai Changyan said, Wei Wei, I'm old. Xian told me that to not be a burden to you in my old age, I must have a partner. Otherwise, wouldn't I be a burden to you? So I plan to find a partner to take care of each other. You can go and find your happiness. Wei Wei Bai. No, you won't be a burden, Dad. Bai Changyan. Good child. I know your intentions. Communicate well with Xian. After all, so many of his first times have been taken away by you. He's actually a good person. Wei Wei Bai. What kind of poison did Xian feed you to make you betray him? After communicating with her father, she turned to glare at Yi Yuxuan. He had convinced her father. Well, a robot like him usually didn't care. If he really cared about something or wanted to please someone, it wouldn't be easy. Even the psychiatrist would cry because of him. Not to mention that her father was an honest and loyal old man who didn't know anything other than business. As long as Yi Yuxuan lowered herself, she would be tricked in minutes. Wei Wei Bai put down the phone expressionlessly. She was really not suitable to talk about marriage now. If it was possible, it would be a high-quality man like Yi Yuxuan. He pounced on her in a matter of minutes. After all, there weren't many good men in this world. Yi Yuxuan didn't gamble, whore, or mess around. He was handsome, rich, and could cook. Previously, he still had the problem of facial paralysis and indifference, but now it was all gone. Wei Wei Bai covered her chest and asked herself, who wouldn't be tempted by such a man? She couldn't be tempted. Wei Wei Bai wanted to get off the bed, but Yi Yuxuan stepped back and held her hand to support her. She looked at Yi Yuxuan awkwardly. Such a feast for the eyes. She turned her head away and told herself not to be swayed. Not to be swayed. This kind of man would never turn back once he was swayed. Wei Wei Bai calmly suppressed her inner thoughts and let down her guard. Her current state was not suitable to be a burden to others, and she had to let Yi Yuxuan know that her soul transmigrated every day to woo other men. Not to mention being together, he would probably feel that his hair was glowing like a green light bulb, illuminating the world. Who asked her to woo so many men? Wei Wei Bai was very vague and calm about the matters of the plane. But she still knew that when she had no bottom line, she wasn't human. Yi Yuxuan slowly rubbed his fingers against her fingertips and said casually, "Get up and eat something first. Then I'll take you out to bask in the sun. Your body has been lying down all this time. Fortunately, you wake up once every 3 days, so your body has a buffer period. Otherwise, your muscles might have atrophied." Address of the full text: https://www.sashu.com. Download of the full text: https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 1257. Wei Wei Bai only felt that her fingers were numb. She thought that Yi Yuxuan was seducing her, but looking at his calm and serious face, could it be a misunderstanding? Wei Wei Bai touched her dry stomach and bowed her head to the food. "Let's talk about it later." As a result, when she followed Yi Yuxuan out, she saw Qin Xiu with a bitter face setting the table. He was wearing a small apron with his sleeves rolled up and was scooping porridge. Qin Xiu saw Wei Wei Bai. "Wei Wei, come and eat. It's medicinal porridge. I specially made it for you." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. What's going on? Why did Qin Xiu come to cook for Yi Yuxuan like a little wife? And everyone knew that she would wake up in 3 days. Every time she woke up or fainted, she didn't get any surprised reaction. Yi Yuxuan walked slowly to the chair and pulled it out. "Eat, Wei Wei." Bai Wei Wei didn't think too much about it. She walked over and sat down. But Yi Yuxuan's fingers slowly slid across the back of her neck. So light, he didn't give Wei Wei Bai any time to react at all. But it succeeded in making Wei Wei Bai tremble. She immediately looked back at Yi Yuxuan, only to find that he calmly pulled out the chair beside him, without showing a trace of strangeness. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. What's with this kind of seduction technique? It's not like Yi Yuxuan's style. Qin Xiu immediately sat down. "Eat, eat. I got up early in the morning to cook for you. I knew you would definitely wake up in 3 days." Wei Wei Bai was a little surprised. "You cooked for me?" Qin Xiu picked up the bowl. "Yes, your dad asked me to take care of you, so I cooked. After eating, I'm going to the hospital. If your dad asks, you must say that I took care of you." Taking care of Yi Yuxuan when it came to cooking was the limit of what she could bear. If he continued to care for her, Yi Yuxuan would definitely hang him up and strangle him. "Wei Wei Bai, why are you so obedient when my dad asked you to take care of him?" Qin Xiu's craftsmanship was not as good as Yi Yuxuan's perversely accurate taste, but it was still not bad. Wei Wei Bai felt ashamed. Men nowadays were better at cooking than the other. Why was her food so disgusting? Was it a matter of talent? While Wei Wei Bai was eating, Yi Yuxuan gently nudged Wei Wei Bai's arm when she wanted to take the chopsticks. It was a touch that was neither light nor heavy. This kind of seductive but silent action that made it impossible for others to catch hold of. It was so alluring that it made one itch. Wei Wei Bai looked up and glanced at Yi Yuxuan. She found that his side profile was still very calm, without a trace of shyness from doing something bad. Wei Wei Bai smiled coldly. This little trick was simply at the kindergarten level. She didn't know what Yi Yuxuan's HP was like. After all, it was a stable period recently. Even if his HP increased, it shouldn't be much. She sighed. She couldn't be moved by this little goblin in front of her. She still didn't have enough HP. She had to at least live until she was 80 years old to not be a burden. When her HP was full, if Yi Yuxuan still found her pleasing to the eye, then they could be together. Thinking like this, Yi Yuxuan dropped his chopsticks. He casually lowered his body and stretched out his slender and beautiful fingers to take the chopsticks. But the chopsticks were a little far away. He whispered, "Wei Wei, the chopsticks are at your feet. Take them." Qin Xiu, who was eating and wanted to go to the hospital quickly, was a little confused. The chopsticks fell. Didn't Yi Yuxuan never care? Anyway, there were servants who would clean up. No, Yi Yuxuan never dropped his chopsticks. Chapter 1258. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment before she bent down and reached for the chopsticks. When she lowered her head, Yi Yuxuan looked up as if nothing had happened. His lips brushed past her delicate lips. Wei Wei Bai. Yi Yuxuan's eyes darkened, but there was a hint of surprise in his voice. It's too close. This is an accident. Wei Wei Bai endured. She grabbed the chopsticks and was about to put them back on the table to get a new one. However, just as she lifted her body, Yi Yuxuan hurried over to take the chopsticks from her hand. Just give it to me. Just like that, his head bumped right into hers. It wasn't heavy, but it still made Wei Wei Bai unable to come back to her senses. Yi Yuxuan's face flashed with a hint of annoyance. He immediately reached out to touch her forehead. Why does it hurt? His fingers were warm, and when they touched her slightly cold forehead, it was a kind of silent comfort. But his fingertips gently caressed her hairline. It made her scalp tingle. This little action was a god-level seduction. Wei Wei Bai didn't want to push it away, but when she didn't, Yi Yuxuan succeeded. Yi Yuxuan saw that she was in a daze and let go of his hand. There was a hint of worry in his eyes. Then he gently kissed her forehead. Her forehead didn't hurt. His kiss just made her feel more impactful. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She was really stunned by his seemingly normal but especially obvious seduction. Yi Yuxuan sighed beautifully. It won't hurt anymore after a kiss. Wei Wei Bai. Qin Shan, who was eating at the side. Could there be a more obvious lie? Yi Yuxuan let go of her and then naturally took a new chopstick. He didn't have a trace of pride in taking advantage of her. He was still calm, rational, and could even be said to be full of damned abstinence. He glanced at her indifferently. Let's eat. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and glared at him for a while before gulping down the porridge to nourish her stomach. Qin Xiu also finished eating. He wiped his mouth with a paper towel and said, "You guys continue to talk about love. I'm leaving. Goodbye. I won't see you two again. Don't you feel bad for bullying a single dog like me? What do you mean by touching his head and kissing his forehead?" Damn it, he would protest too. He also wanted to find someone to kiss on the forehead. Qin Xiu ran away, leaving only Wei Wei Bai and Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan felt a little better. Wei Wei Bai felt gloomy. She struggled between reason and insanity. Sometimes Yi Yuxuan's damned seduction method was especially irritable. Felt like there was a damned little goblin around, shyly stripping off her clothes to seduce you, but when you really pounce on her, he would only look confused and innocent, completely not admitting that he was seducing people. Shameless. Yi Yuxuan saw her annoyed face, and his eyes flashed with a few traces of laughter. After the meal, the servant also cleaned up the table. Then the well-trained servant disappeared again. If it wasn't for the cleaning, the servant wouldn't come back. Yi Yuxuan opened his laptop and began to deal with some things. Wei Wei Bai had nothing to do. She held the juice and pondered how to open her mouth. Yi Yuxuan finished dealing with a project when he heard her voice with some hesitation. Yi Yuxuan, it's not appropriate for us to live together now. Yi Yuxuan didn't raise his head. His fingers quickly began to deal with the next important official business. He casually replied, "It's not living together. I'm taking care of you." Your father agreed. Wei Wei Bai, I'm an adult. Guardians can't interfere with my decisions. T. Chapter 1259. Yi Yuxuan looked up, his eyes soft. No, you have a guardian. Your illness is classified as a mental illness, so you are not a fully independent adult. You are a child who needs a guardian to take care of you. A mentally ill person needed a guardian. Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly. Mental illness? Yi Yuxuan nodded. My doctor said so. Wei Wei Bai, you were the one who said it, right? This made-up story is so calm and even wants to throw the blame on you. Your doctor, isn't he Qin Xiu? Yi Yuxuan's distressed voice sounded. So now you should listen to your father. Wei Wei Bai snorted. What can you do if I don't listen to you? Using her father to threaten her? There was no deterrence at all. Yi Yuxuan's fake distress disappeared, and he looked at her without any expression. Then he stood up, came in front of her, and put his hands gently on her shoulders. The warmth of his palms passed through her clothes, and there was a kind of friction. Wei Wei Bai couldn't move, and her breathing was a little messy. Yi Yuxuan had already bent down gracefully, and his thin lips were close to her ear. He said softly, "If you don't listen to your father, then I can only change your guardian. For example, me. Is that okay?" Clearly, he asked if she was okay. But his actions were restrained, and his tone was domineering. Felt like her answer was not important at all. He had the final say. At this moment, Wei Wei Bai was suppressed by his aura. Yi Yuxuan saw that she didn't dare to make a sound, so he chuckled softly and let go of her. His fingers slid over her shoulders, and he succeeded in making her tremble. There was a hint of heat in his eyes, but he didn't do anything excessive. "Take it slow, don't scare her." Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. She felt that Yi Yuxuan's entire attitude had changed. He seemed to have become more proactive and seductive. Wasn't she the one who took the initiative? When she didn't want to flirt with him, he rushed to flirt with her. Indeed, every dog has its day. Yi Yuxuan's attitude was very clear. If she was not obedient, he would not live with her. He was about to change guardians. What did guardian mean? Apart from her parents, it was her husband. So he was brazenly proposing to her. Wei Wei Bai touched her face. It was a little hot. She said to the silent system, "Sigh, seriously. I clearly don't want a relationship, but this man is forcing it on me." The system saw that Yi Yuxuan's attention was diverted to work. Finally, he dared to say in a low voice, "Just refuse directly." Wei Wei Bai said, "You don't understand. This is a problem that only perfect people have. If I refuse and he doesn't let go, then the situation will be very awkward. We can't be so rude. After all, Yi Yuxuan is my life." "You're perfect." "What a perfect narcissist." Wei Wei Bai said, It's good that you know." The system turned around. The host was as thick-skinned as always. Wei Wei Bai said, "How's my life points?" The system saw that Yi Yuxuan was not paying attention to it, so it immediately said as usual, "Now your external life points can be expanded to 2,500 days. You received 30 days of life points from the previous mission, 2 days of small mission rewards, and 10 days of Chinese New Year red packet rewards. You have a total of 1562 HP, innate HP. After deducting the life points spent on the mission, you have 1,400 days of life points left. T. Chapter 1260. Wei Wei Bai did some mental calculations. "You ate more than 10 days of my life points?" System. Why was the host able to accurately calculate how much instant noodles it ate even though it was so vague? Wei Wei Bai. "Forget it. It's not easy for you either. Eat it." Her family's tongzi was so pitiful that she was too embarrassed to blame it. The system was touched. The host was still a good person. It said emotionally, "Oh right, Yi Yuxuan's life points are off the charts again. When he was flirting with you just now, his life points automatically increased by about 500. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up and looked straight at Yi Yuxuan. She wanted to kneel down and call him daddy. She was attacking the plane, and in the end, she even lost her life points. In the end, Yi Yuxuan, this master, casually increased her life points to 2,000. Wei Wei Bai. If it weren't for the fact that I can't be moved, I would have been unable to control myself and flirted with him to increase my life points. The system didn't dare to say anything again, because Yi Yuxuan turned back to look at Wei Wei Bai again. He saw Wei Wei Bai obediently sitting on the sofa, holding her fruit juice in a daze. Like a lazy cat, it only stayed in his domain. This feeling was really good. Yi Yuxuan looked down lightly and looked at the chat screen on the laptop. "Tell me more specifically, what did you see?" Yi Yuxuan's eyes darkened. Thinking about what the person over there did, he typed the characters. "Boundless gold. Golden powder sprinkled down from the dark void." That person asked, "What's in the gold?" Yi Yuxuan. "Red flames." Red flames appeared from the gold. That person said, "Boundless void darkness. Red flames. Fate." Yi Yuxuan asked, "Fate?" The man said, "My eyes can only see this much. The power of what you see is too great for my ability to bear." Yi Yuxuan expressionlessly propped up her chin and thought for a while. His rational mind was constantly calculating and repeatedly analyzing what he was seeing. Finally, he typed, "Can you leave your place?" The man said, "No, I'm blind and can't go out. But you can bring her here and see if I can predict her future." Yi Yuxuan, "Oh, the future. I heard that you don't even need to come into contact with others to know their fate. Can you see my future now?" The man said, "No, no." The two no's carried an incomparable coldness. Yi Yuxuan stared at the word, "no." That person continued, "Your future is a gigantic and terrifying abyss. An abyss that even my eyes cannot peer into." Yi Yuxuan didn't show much emotion. "I want to know if there's a way to change the dream." The man said, Dream. That's not a dream. Not a dream." Yi Yuxuan didn't seem surprised at all, as if she already knew this fact. The man said, "How do you want to change it?" Yi Yuxuan tilted her head and glanced at Wei Bai, who was drinking fruit juice with her head down. She didn't know where her mind was wandering. His expression was gentle for a moment. Then he turned back and typed, "I want her to never be able to leave me." She kept on leaving him, risking everything to obtain his love, just to leave his world. Yi Yuxuan accurately guessed, "I already know what she wants to do. She needs my love. No matter how much I hurt her, she will take the initiative to chase after me and make me fall in love with her. Then she will just abandon me like she's abandoning trash." Below to record this reading. Chapter 1261. Wei Bai only wanted his love. Once he fell in love with her, he had no value. This was the truth accumulated from so many dreams. He experienced it one dream after another, thinking that it was their previous life. Every time she woke up, it coincided with his dream and he guessed that she was asleep. That dream was synchronized with his. It was not the memories of their previous lives. Later, he finally discovered a terrifying pattern. Every time he completely fell in love with her, she would leave him. The rationality in his mind calculated these coincidences and finally discovered a fact that was not a coincidence. For some reason, she needed his love to leave the dream. She woke up from a vegetative state. Yi Yuxuan, "I suspect that her life depends on my love to continue." Perhaps in the beginning, on the day she had a heart attack, the doctor announced that she might not be able to hold on and would die. But later on, she miraculously woke up. He should have known that she needed his love at that time to wake up, because his dream started at that time. That person said, "I saw her future was vague and dark. It was similar to yours, but not as scary as yours. It was more like her fate was intertwined with Yi Yuxuan's. Yi Yuxuan's abyss of darkness covered her originally ordinary life, so he could not see Wei Bai's specific future." Yi Yuxuan, "Can you make it so that she can't leave me so easily?" That person said, "Is it to change the ending of the tragedy?" Yi Yuxuan, "Yes, I don't want her to stay in the dream forever, but at least stay with me until we're old." He did not want her to leave again and again. He had a terrible premonition that if he watched her leave him like this again, even if she woke up in reality, he would not be able to bear it and explode. As for the consequences of exploding, he was actually a little confused. There was only one thing he was sure of. He would not hurt her. That person said, "Bring her to me. I'll see if I can change it." After saying that, the person on the other side disconnected. Yi Yuxuan's account also automatically transferred a considerable amount of money to that person's account. Yi Yuxuan looked up and saw that person's account name. Blind fortune teller, fortune telling, marriage, career, misfortune, and the gender of a second child. You're not allowed to be free. If he didn't know that this person really had a book, he would have seen this kind of small advertisement. He didn't want to talk to him at all. Yi Yuxuan turned off their communication and glanced at Wei Bai's head. The golden powder was still there, and Wei Bai shouldn't be able to see it. She sat on the sofa, oblivious. Her toes were casually placed on the carpet, and her fair ankles were exceptionally delicate. As Yi Yuxuan looked at her, she automatically overlapped her with the woman in her dream. She should have a different appearance in his dream, but he couldn't remember what she looked like. But he knew that she was enough. The follow-up to A Singer's Ex-Boyfriend is a Cat. The concert venue was packed with fans, and the scalpers were selling like crazy. A ticket was sold at a sky-high price, and it was still being fought over. It was a huge stage for 100,000 people. The votes were sold in an instant. Even at the peak of Oh Jinma's popularity, ticket sales weren't as fast as today, because this concert was Oh Jinma's last concert. After Wei Wei Bai's death was announced, there was a wave of condolences on the internet. //. Chapter 1262. Her song was also made into an album by Oh Jinma. The sales skyrocketed and the album was constantly out of stock. The industry was also full of good reviews. At the same time, Oh Jinma was silent. He didn't send any news. It seemed that he was too weak to stand up because of Wei Wei Bai's death. Everyone knew how much he loved Wei Wei Bai. During the half-year when Wei Wei Bai was in a vegetative state, he took care of Wei Wei Bai's news. And he matured and grew up. A man's mature charm was more attractive than an angel's. It increased his popularity instead of decreasing. But Wei Wei Bai's death cut off his news. The fans waited for a long time before they received news of this concert. What shocked the fans was that it was actually his farewell concert. No matter how much they couldn't accept it, Oh Jinma had already made up his mind and no one could change it. When the concert was about to start, the assistant appeared backstage with a worried expression. "Brother Mo, it's about to start." A man sat quietly on the chair. Under the lights, his amber eyes were so clean and cold that it was scary. It was barren and emotionless. Oh Jinma looked up at the assistant and nodded. Then he picked up his guitar and walked onto the stage. The assistant looked at his lonely back and suddenly thought of the day Wei Wei Bai died. No, actually 3 days had already passed. There was no news from Oh Jinma, so he went to look for him. Then he found that Oh Jinma was burying a cat. The big-faced cat had died of old age. It was already very old and had spent the last year of its life being adopted by Wei Wei Bai. Then it met Oh Jinma and its life became better. The assistant saw that the cat had died. Although he was sad, he wasn't shocked. He said, "Brother Mo, the cat is dead. Is Sister Wei very sad?" Was it because Wei Wei Bai was sad and he was too busy comforting her that he didn't contact them? Oh Jinma buried the cat in silence. Then he turned around. His chin was full of stubble and there were dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious that he was dispirited and haggard. The assistant was shocked. "Brother Mo, what's wrong?" Oh Jinma looked at him expressionlessly and said, "Go and contact them. I want to send Wei Wei away." It was only after he sent Wei Wei away that he found out. Wei Wei Bai was dead. Meanwhile, Oh Jinma had been guarding the dead Wei Wei Bai for 3 whole days. Not eating or drinking, just guarding a corpse like this. If Oh Jinma didn't think that Wei Wei Bai would rot at this rate, he wouldn't have asked his assistant to contact the funeral parlor. This was because Oh Jinma felt that Wei Wei Bai would definitely not like him leaving in an ugly state. When she had turned into a cat, there were many times when she disliked the big-faced cat. That was why she cared about her appearance. On the day of the funeral, there was a heavy downpour. It seemed like Oh Jinma had deliberately chosen it. The weather forecast said that it would be the heaviest rain of the year. The funeral was quiet and simple. There were a few helpers, but the main one was Oh Jinma. When it was time to bury the ashes, the storm came as expected. It actually hurt when the rain hit the body. However, Oh Jinma said, "You guys can go down the mountain first." The storm blinded everyone's eyes. They only saw Oh Jinma standing straight in front of Wei Wei Bai's tombstone quietly. The assistant had no choice but to lead the helpers down the mountain. He knew that Oh Jinma needed a quiet space. Before he went down the mountain, he turned around and saw Oh Jinma kneeling in front of the tombstone. He seemed to be holding a red velvet box tightly in his hand. There should be a ring in that box. He was very familiar with it because when Oh Jinma bought the ring, he had also helped him with the reference. Transmigration system. "My Adonis, come over here." Transmigration system. "My Adonis, come over here." / transmigration system. "My Adonis, come over here." Transmigration system. "My Adonis, come over here." Transmigration system. My Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1263. It seemed like he was waiting for Wei Wei Bai to wake up so that he could propose to her immediately. The rain was so heavy that it blurred O Jinma's figure. However, the assistant knew that O Jinma's heart-wrenching cries were buried in the heavy rain. This was also the reason why O Jinma chose to hold the funeral on such a stormy day. This was the only way that no one could hear his cries of losing Wei Wei Bai. On the stage, O Jinma hugged his guitar and looked at everyone indifferently. The glow sticks were like stars that lit up the entire stage. He was too used to this scene. He was used to a lively stage. He knew his own personality. He was actually afraid of being alone. Even though he liked to write songs in peace, he was actually someone who couldn't stand being alone. Hence, on the stage, his fans became his pillars of support. Their liveliness made him feel less lonely. This was also why he was so afraid of being abandoned by his fans. After Wei Wei Bai appeared, he realized that he didn't need a stage or fans anymore, because her existence was his greatest peace of mind. O Jinma adjusted the microphone and said indifferently, "The song I want to sing today is I Have You for the Rest of My Life, and I Have You for the Rest of My Life." He still remembered how he felt when he saw her release this song on Weibo. He was very happy. He had never been so happy. He was so happy that a big boy who was afraid of being alone suddenly became strong and mature, because he knew that there was someone who held him in her heart. He was no longer the O Jinma who had no fans and nothing. Someone wanted him. O Jinma tried his best to sing. However, he realized that he couldn't sing that kind of happiness. As he sang, all the fans at the scene cried. On the other hand, O Jinma was expressionless. There wasn't a single tear in his eyes. He sat there in a daze for a long time. The stage was silent. However, no one protested. O Jinma suddenly laughed at himself. "Actually, I used to think that you were the most important people to me. You were my motivation to improve. You were the ones who pushed me to the top of the music industry. But later on, I met her. I'm actually not an angel. I'm selfish and evil. I knew that her real song might have been stolen by Zhang Ro, but I still allowed her to be attacked by you. Because she knows that my name is Big Tree. I come from the countryside. I used to climb up the tree naked. I also stole her sweet potatoes and ate them like a hungry ghost." O Jinma said this and smiled faintly. He wasn't embarrassed at all. "Look, I'm not the noble prince or the elegant angel." He lowered his head and looked at the guitar. "Her name is Xiaohua. She came to this city because of me. I'm afraid that she will tell you that I'm just a village boy. I'm pretending to date her, but I'm actually lying to her." This was his dark history. Could cause great destruction could. But he didn't care was Jinma. "I was lying. I was lying. I was lying." Was. The fans quieted down. They watched him slowly talk about his selfish past. "O Jinma, later on, I was slapped in the face. I fell in love with her. She gave me everything you could give me. Security, happiness, and anticipation for the future. Maturity and strength. She gently changed him into a responsible man." Chapter 1264. I thought that after losing her, all of you would be able to give me some support. O Jinma touched his guitar and smiled helplessly. In the end, it didn't work. All of you are no longer meaningful to me. Fans were no longer of any use because he realized that Wei Wei Bai could give him something. No one could give him anything. O Jinma's pale face had no makeup. His fair fingers strummed the guitar strings. His fragile skin was cut by the strings, but he didn't feel any pain. I wrote a song, The Big Tree and the Little Flower. He wanted to tell her that he was the big tree next door, and she was his little flower. The song was light and beautiful, and it was Wei Wei Bai's style. But it was so sad that people couldn't suppress the urge to cry. The concert venue became a mourning for Wei Wei Bai's funeral. O Jinma was the calmest one. After he finished the song, his fingers were cut by the guitar strings, and the guitar was stained with blood. When the curtain fell, O Jinma said to everyone, Goodbye. We won't see each other again. Won't see each other again. The person he wanted to see was really gone. After that, the fans couldn't see any news of Ojinma anymore. He really left just like that. He didn't make a comeback, and there was no news about him. He disappeared from the face of the earth. His assistant could contact him occasionally. Although he left, the dividends from Enchanting shares were still given to him. He didn't have to worry about food and clothing. Even if he didn't do anything, there wouldn't be any problems with material matters. One Christmas, his assistant finally found out that he was singing on the streets of a certain country. The assistant ran over and saw Ojinma wearing a mask. His hair was messy, and his clothes were messy. He was carrying Weiwei Bai's guitar and had a hat by his feet. He didn't know how long he had been singing. There were many coins in the hat and a large amount of money. Ojinma sat by the roadside. Snow fell on his hair and shoulders. He looked at his assistant indifferently, then pretended not to know him. He picked up the hat, poured out the coins in it, and put the hat on his head. Then he carried the guitar and walked back. Her long back was still beautiful, but she had a downtrodden temperament. The assistant followed him and found that he was staying at the best hotel. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. In fact, knowing that he had never mistreated them materially, they were not so anxious. But he still lived like a vagrant. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared again. They were able to find out which country he was in through his spending records, but they couldn't find any trace of him. Later on, his assistant heard that he had gone to the Antarctic tundra alone. Then he never came back. In the end, Ojinma couldn't find his own happiness and self-destructed because of his spiritual support. When the assistant was old enough to have dementia, he could still remember the story of Big Tree and Little Blossom. He cried whenever he thought about it. He didn't even know why he was crying. That story clearly had nothing to do with him. Yi Yuxuan sighed faintly. The man in her dream had traveled all over the world. After he had seen enough of the beautiful scenery, he searched for everyone. He would never be able to find another woman who could bring him happiness. He could understand Ojinma's feelings of being a vagrant in the end. He couldn't bear to lose the most important person. He could only numb himself and search for someone who was similar to her to comfort his broken heart. In the end, he self-destructed. Perhaps, if this continued, he would self-destruct one day. Weiwei Bai sensed that Yi Yuxuan's gaze was especially strange. She shouted for the system. The system didn't dare to make a sound. Weiwei Bai, this stupid system always dropped the ball. When it was about time to sleep, Weiwei Bai stared at the only bed in the room. This was a proper 5-person bed. No matter how she rolled, it wouldn't fall to the ground. In the bathroom, the sound of Yi Yuxuan washing up could be heard. She tried her best to control herself and not move her head towards the bathroom. Because that damned bathroom was half open, the door was frosted glass. She could see the hazy water vapor. Under the steam, a perfect and muscular body was moving seductively with the steam. Yi Yuxuan actually renovated this kind of bathroom. She couldn't tell that he was so open. Weiwei Bai struggled in her heart. She had to sleep on the sofa. If she didn't let Yi Yuxuan have any ideas, it would be bad. It was just the two of them. What if he couldn't control his beastly nature? The bathroom door opened. Weiwei Bai couldn't help but turn around to take a look. Dense steam flowed out. Yi Yuxuan casually draped a short towel around his waist. Under his smooth forehead, a pair of beautiful eyes were stained with steam, bringing about a natural sexiness. The lines from his shoulders to his chest were just right. His muscles weren't that exaggerated, but they were especially good-looking. When he walked, his slender legs were faintly discernible under the scarf. Weiwei Bai stared blankly for a moment. Then, she turned her head with difficulty. Out of sight, out of mind. Yi Yuxuan walked to her side. As if by accident, the towel around his waist fell to the ground. Weiwei Bai lowered her head and saw the towel fall by her feet. The man was incomparably indifferent. He bent over, revealing his strong waist. He reached out his hand and slowly placed it on Weiwei Bai's leg. Weiwei, the towel is a little far. Help me hold it. Weiwei Bai, don't stop me. I'm gonna strangle this damned little vixen. Comma. Chapter 1265. Wei Wei Bai's hands trembled as she reached for the damned towel. A slender hand was suddenly placed on the back of her hand. His wet fingers and short nails gently scratched the back of her hand. Bai Weiwei's body stiffened, but she heard the man's low, frosted voice. "I thought you wouldn't take it." So he took it for himself. He was innocent. He didn't have to go to jail for murder and arson. He saw her bend down to take it, so he bent down to touch her hand. Wei Wei Bai endured. She endured the explosion. Was he done? He was doing it on purpose. He was definitely doing it on purpose. He was doing it on purpose. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was enduring like a little wife. It wasn't like her at all. If he dared to show it, why wouldn't she dare to look? She picked up the towel and suddenly looked up. She saw his underwear. Wei Wei Bai. "What kind of underwear are you wearing under the towel? Or boxers?" Wei Wei Bai gave a fake smile and passed the towel to Yi Yuxuan. "Hold your towel properly. Don't drop it again." Yi Yuxuan looked at her deeply and then took it. This sound, coming from his nose, simply gave people goosebumps. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but reach out to touch her arm. Then he got on the bed as if he had no other purpose. Bai Weiwei was seduced, neither up nor down. She couldn't help but ask the system, did Yi Yuxuan take the wrong medicine? Why was he taking the initiative to seduce her? And in such a scheming way. The system was facing the harmonious bullet screen army and couldn't hear the host's words at all. Yes, the bullet screen army was upgraded again. The towel hadn't dropped yet. When Yi Yuxuan walked out half-naked, the system was blocked. Wei Wei Bai didn't hear the system's reply and suddenly wondered if the system was in love. How could it disappear like that? Blocked system. Injustice. Wei Wei Bai dawdled again. She nestled on the sofa and watched Yi Yuxuan sit on the bed and read a book. She didn't look like a little fairy at all. After flirting with her, he put on a serious expression. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and tugged at the blanket on the sofa, intending to make do with the sofa for the night. She had already said that she was not tempted. She had to have a backbone and not be tempted like this. Her self-control was very strong. Yi Yuxuan faintly lowered his head. Under the white light, his bare upper body and the beautiful lines of his muscles moved with him, and there was a kind of temptation that made people unable to look away. His hands, however, were as flawless as jade as he gently flipped through the pages of the book. So what if he was reading a book? Was he reading a pornographic book? How could she be tempted by flipping the pages of a book? Wei Wei Bai pulled the blanket over her head and then lay down on the sofa with her back facing Yi Yuxuan. Out of sight, out of mind. Her damned heart, it was going to beat faster again. She spat at her own heart. Why is it beating? Don't you know that your heart is disabled? If it beats too fast, it will die. She reached out and clutched her chest, trying hard to delete the seductive images of Yi Yuxuan's body in her mind. For someone like her who was used to seeing all kinds of big scenes, she shouldn't lose her composure like this. She was used to seeing big scenes. Wei Wei Bai repeated the brainwashing and finally succeeded a little. Suddenly, a pair of hands reached out from behind her. Then, when she was unprepared, her whole body was lifted up. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Her face was pressed against a warm skin, and under the skin, there was the steady sound of a heartbeat. Is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1266. Sound after sound, along with the warmth of the skin on his chest, made by Wei Wei's face redden. This was uncontrollable. It was a woman's instinct that was aroused by strong male temptation and hormones. It was useless to be used to big scenes. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened as Yi Yuxuan carried her to the bed. In fact, when she was flirting with Yi Yuxuan in the past, she was really fearless to the point of being lawless. But that was because she had no other thoughts about him. That was why she could mess around. But now she was clear about the change in her feelings. That was why she started to shrink back and didn't dare to cross the line easily. She had seen many cases of wooing others and wooing herself in the end. In fact, if it wasn't for the system's emotional shield, she probably wouldn't have been able to hold on to so many strategies, because feelings were both sides. Her acting skills were based on her being unmoved, so no matter how much she was hurt, as long as her heart was calm, she was able to stand up countless times without any fear. Some people said that only when one had true feelings could they influence the person they wanted to woo. Actually, it was wrong. She had feelings from the beginning. Then, she couldn't strictly control everything. Jealousy, happiness, sadness, pain. Once these emotions surfaced, there was no need to do anything. She would lose no matter what. On the contrary, people who were unmoved in their hearts could be in an invincible position. In reality, Wei Wei Bai really felt that kind of heavy feelings. This made her look at Yi Yuxuan as if she was looking at a bomb. And it was a strawberry-flavored bomb. It would be a pity if she didn't open it. Yi Yuxuan put her on the bed. His arm muscles bulged slightly. He sat on the bed sideways and pulled the blanket over. "What are you afraid of? I won't force you." Wei Wei Bai trembled. She felt that when Yi Yuxuan said that he wouldn't force her. The look in his eyes was like that of a big bad wolf, naked and scorching. She slowly shifted her body, changing her position so that she wasn't so close to Yi Yuxuan. She did not insist on sleeping on the sofa. It was not a matter of being pretentious or not. But if she really insisted on sleeping on the sofa, Yi Yuxuan would probably be happy to hug her a few times. The more he hugged her, the more he would have the chance to do that. She had to work hard to isolate the ambiguous atmosphere between them. Yi Yuxuan didn't seem to understand what she was thinking. Instead, she moved her body naturally. He squeezed her. Wei Wei Bai was cursing in her heart. This was harassment and molestation. The bed was so big. She had shrunk to the side of the bed and was about to fall off. But this arsonist was still pushing his luck. His chest pressed against her back, and the fiery temperature simply boiled her body. Her whole body was red, and her breathing began to become heavy and chaotic again. Wei Wei Bai resisted with all her might. "Yi Yuxuan, stay away from me. The bed is so big." Yi Yuxuan said lightly, "The blanket is too thin. I'm a little cold." Wei Wei Bai cold my foot. This room is designed to automatically adjust all kinds of temperature to ensure that it can be maintained at the most comfortable temperature for the human body. How is it cold? She resisted stubbornly. "If you're cold, then get more blankets. If you continue like this, I'm going to sleep in another room." Actually, she wanted to sleep in separate rooms from the beginning. Why did she only think of this now? It was all Yi Yuxuan's seduction that made her dizzy. Yi Yuxuan's voice was still indifferent. "There are no extra blankets, and there are no other rooms here. This room was designed for me alone. There is no room for outsiders." To read the at https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://m. Sashu.com. Chapter 1267. Wei Wei Bai clutched her chest and complained to the system. "Yi Yuxuan, that rascal has gone astray. He kept biting and flirting with me. My heart disease relapsed. I had no choice but to run away." The system's face was cold. "Coward. He's a 10,000-year-old stone man. Can't you handle him?" Wei Wei Bai was an old demon. There was no reason for her to have a heart attack because of Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Even the stone man has become a demon. He was no longer the little Xian who didn't know anything and would get shy when she pressed him against the wall. The system said, "But your life points increased to 2,500. Keep it up next time." Wei Wei Bai said, "I can't wait to kneel down and worship Yi Yuxuan." Without Yi Yuxuan, she really couldn't live. If it wasn't for her short life, she would have submitted to Yi Yuxuan. After all, it was common to repay a life-saving grace with one's body. Of course, if the person repaying the grace had a face full of pockmarks. "Sorry, I'll be your slave in my next life, but don't even think about it in this life." Wei Wei Bai suddenly realized that something was wrong. She was wearing a tattered dress, sitting in a pool of blood and mud. Her fair fingers were full of blood and mud. It was raining, torrential rain. The ground was full of corpses, washed by the rain. The air was filled with the smell of blood. She looked around and saw that everything was red. Bai Weiwei felt that another incomparably savage plane had arrived. Then, she suddenly felt cold all over. Under the cold rain and blood, under the gloomy sky, a figure slowly appeared. He was wearing a black robe, holding a long sword in his hand. The sword was full of horrible bloodstains. After being washed by the rain for so long, it still hadn't been washed clean. The man wore a black mask, like a god of death. He stepped on the corpses and walked towards Weiwei Bai. His voice was cold and calm. The next saintess of the demon sect? This mission is to obtain the love of No Trace of Snow. Target: No Trace of Snow. Progress: 0. Time: 8 months. Weiwei Bai was at a loss. Her long dress was torn, revealing a pair of snow-white feet. A silver bell hung on her ankle, and blood stained her white toes. There was a strange mixture of cleanliness and seductiveness. The man's cold eyes were not moved at all. He raised his sword. In your next life, don't be a member of the devil sect. Weiwei Bai meow meow meow. What about the memory input? It was just a strategy quest. She was completely confused about her current situation. Was she going to be sent back the moment she transmigrated? The man's sword was extremely nimble. Weiwei Bai suddenly rolled on the ground. She was not afraid of getting dirty. After avoiding this dangerous attack, she got up and ran away. However, the white sword light cut through the clothes on her back. Her clothes were suddenly torn, revealing a large area of her thin, snow-white back. Her white and tender skin was beautiful under the washing of the rain. The red blood lotus on her shoulder was in full bloom. The man's sword was about to pierce through her heart. But when he saw this flower, he immediately stopped. This is Weiwei Bai hugged the torn clothes with both hands and ran into the depths of the fog without a care. Suddenly, there were many footsteps in the distance. The man looked up and sneered. Then, he put away his sword and followed Weiwei Bai's footsteps. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. Weiwei Bai had already received the memory. She was the daughter of the demon sect saintess, and the next saintess. The saintess did not have martial arts. She was like a mascot in the demon sect, an ambassador of the public relations department. And the man just now, who wanted to kill her with a sword, was called No Trace of Snow. He was the leader of the Wulin Alliance. Chapter 1268. The leader of Wulin, the saintess of the demonic sect. This was a love-hate relationship. Weiwei Bai expressed that she was not looking forward to it at all. As for why the leader of Wulin wore a mask to kill the demonic sect, it could not be seen by others. It was because the leader of Wulin had an even more terrifying identity. He was the leader of the demonic sect. Weiwei Bai expressed that this was a messy relationship. She glanced at No Trace of Snow's information and could only praise this old man as a werewolf, a little more than a ruthless person. This man was crazy to the point of morbidity. He liked to play with people's hearts and was terrifyingly hypocritical. His biggest interest was behind the scenes, planning terrifying massacres time and time again. Then, when no one could catch the murderer, he would put on the white robe of the leader of Wulin, appearing holy and elegant. He would start to solve the case and bring the murderer to justice. He enjoyed the worship of the entire Wulin. But she was wrong when she transmigrated. The leader of the demonic sect had actually died a year ago. No Trace of Snow killed him. Since then, he had been wearing a mask and controlling all the affairs of the demonic sect. In this year, the demonic sect had killed many Orthodox Wulin sects and destroyed many Orthodox Wulin sections. This was the work of Shui Wuhan, who had done it. No Trace of Snow felt bored after making the demonic sect a scapegoat, so he planned today's massacre of the demonic sect. The leader of the demonic sect had killed his own people. He thought of the pain of those who trusted him before they died and the shock of being betrayed. No Trace of Snow felt that he had obtained great satisfaction. The original owner had no interaction with No Trace of Snow. Because before she was the saintess, she was just an ordinary member of the demonic sect, the inconspicuous kind. So, although everyone knew that her mother was the saintess, She was very likely to be the next saintess, but she still had no sense of existence. This also caused No Trace of Snow to almost never meet the original owner. No, they just met. He had come to kill her with a sword. As for why No Trace of Snow liked to do this kind of thing, because he was a pervert. This man was peerless in appearance, elegant in demeanor, and unparalleled in martial arts. He was one of the most admired figures in the world. He had 0 negative reviews in the Wuling world. Furthermore, because he had killed many great demons, he had successfully become the Wuling Alliance Master. If he stopped just like that, he would be the current Holy Father, the type who shrouded the earth in holy light. He would be a divine figure. However, No Trace of Snow was a hypocrite in private and loved to torment people. What he loved the most was to let someone experience the best of everything, and then he would personally shatter it and enjoy the agonizing howls of others before they died. Wei Bai expressed that she really knew too little about perverts. These freaks came in all shapes and sizes, and No Trace of Snow was the most abnormal and peculiar one. What kind of lunatic was this? Furthermore, she still had to conquer this lunatic. She had to change her target. If she didn't change, she didn't seem to have a choice. Wei Bai, Tongzi, this kind of freak is a bit out of line. The system, there are even more out of line. It flipped through the notification and said, Side mission, earn 100 heartache points. It was too early for him to complete this side quest. Was it because it was too late in the previous plane, so it had to make up for this one? Before Wei Bai could be confused, the system explained, this side mission is related to the time you have to conquer the next plane. Wei Bai was confused. What conquering time? Isn't it the main system that gives out the time? The system. Didn't we submit an application last time? You want a plane with a longer conquering time. Chapter 1269. Wei Bai. There was actually such a thing. Oh right, there was such a thing. But the application was too long ago, she had forgotten. The system said, our application was approved. Because we didn't have money to bribe others, we applied for the worst plan, which means that the difficulty level of this plane will be increased by 3 times. Wei Bai said, I think every plane is extremely difficult, and the most difficult one is the one where we have to cut off the penis. Although this plane had the saint of the demonic sect and the fake martial arts alliance master. But if they really wanted to conquer it, it shouldn't be 3 times harder. The system said, this plane won't remind you of the favorability level. There are only 3 chances to do so, and they are when it's 0, 50, and 100. Wei Bai. So difficult, there was no favorability level notification. It was more difficult for her to tell if the other party was sincere or not, so she could only rely on her own rich experience. The system said, also, if the heartbreaking value is 100, then the conquering time for the next plane will be a lifetime. Wei Bai immediately perked up. A lifetime conquering time. She didn't have to be chased by time anymore. The system said, if the heartbreaking is unsuccessful, then this application is invalid. In fact, when it applied, it didn't think it would succeed. But when Yi Yuxuan awakened a small part of his soul, he started to tamper with the needle of the fate roulette. Wei Bai, who had always been unlucky, received his blessing of luck. The application was approved. When Yi Yuxuan tampered with the needle, his purpose seemed to be to keep Wei Bai, so that she couldn't easily escape from the plane. Under its interference, although it failed. But it was still a stroke of luck, and Wei Bai's application was approved. The system saw that it knew nothing about the running host, and silently guarded the secret. Wei sneered, humph, torturing the heart. Ah, my strong point, if I don't torture that Shui pervert with a sissy name until he cries for his father and calls for his mother, it won't be over. No Trace of Snow in this plane was sick, so she didn't feel bad about torturing him. Just as she set the flag, she suddenly lost her footing. Then he rolled down the cliff. The system immediately said, activate minimum life guarantee. Wei Bai rolled into a pile of weeds in a daze under the protection of the life subsistence guarantee. She was not hurt at all, but she suddenly felt a chill on her back. She raised her head in a daze and saw the sky full of rain. A man in a white robe appeared. He held a bamboo umbrella and walked gracefully across the uneven ground. Miraculously, his shoes were not stained by a trace of water vapor, leaving no trace on the water, the pinnacle of Qinggong. His black hair was tied up with a light-colored ribbon. His black eyes were filled with gentleness. His robes fluttered in the wind, making him look like a celestial being. He seemed to have sensed that there was someone in the weeds. He turned his head and stared at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai held her breath, not daring to move. That person smiled. His peerlessly handsome face was alluring because of this smile. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes wide and looked at him without moving. The man seemed to know that he had achieved his goal. He turned around and walked away, but his footsteps were slow, as if he was waiting for something. Wei Wei Bai did as he wished and immediately rushed out of the weeds. Then she quickly ran to the front and knelt on the ground. Her pair of childish, incomparably innocent eyes stared at him. "Celestial, please accept me." The man seemed to be stunned. Then he lowered his eyes. His voice was as gentle as a clear spring. "You are Fast Transmigration System. Adonis, come here. Crossover System. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration System. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu.com. The next time you open the bookshelf, you will be able to see it. Chapter 1270. Wei Wei Bai's entire body was trembling. Her clothes were tattered and her entire body was covered in blood. Her tears fell. "My family was killed by a devil. I want to take revenge. Your martial arts are so high. Can you accept me as your disciple?" She was like a pitiful young bird that was cruelly pushed out of her stable nest. She fell into the dust, her body covered in wounds. She was so cute that people wanted to destroy her. She saw the man's peak Qinggong. She knew that he could help her take revenge. "Who killed your family?" The man's voice carried a trace of coldness, as if seeing her in such a sorry state made him empathize with her. The gentleness on his face turned into a righteous majesty. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. She hugged her chest with both hands, but her clothes continued to fall. Her round and beautiful shoulders were mercilessly destroyed by the rain. Her pitiful and innocent eyes under her eyelashes were filled with gorgeous hatred. "It's the devil sex leader." The man frowned. A trace of sorrow flashed across his face. Then he said, "I'll find a place for you to stay. As for the devil sex leader, I'll capture him and bring him to justice. There's no need to acknowledge me as your master." Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly. She seemed to be at a loss. It seemed that stopping him and kneeling down to acknowledge him as her master had already used up all of her courage. Seeing that the man was about to leave, Wei Wei Bai suddenly stood up. She reached out and pulled on his robes, her wet eyes pleading. "I want to take revenge myself. Please accept me." The man's handsome brows wrinkled. "No, revenge is not suitable for you, I'd better." His words came to a halt, a trace of twisted excitement exploding in his gentle eyes. Wei Wei Bai released her hand. Her clothes all fell to the ground. The blood lotus on her shoulder was enchanting. Her pure white body, in the rain, had a kind of beauty that could captivate one's soul. But her face was filled with desperation and madness. Blood stained her cheeks, setting off the gorgeous light of hatred in her eyes. She was so beautiful that it could drive people crazy. "If I can't become your disciple, then please let me become your woman." Only he could take revenge, even if he had to sacrifice his own body. The man's breathing became heavier, and it took him a lot of effort to suppress the darkness in his eyes. He leaned over and placed the umbrella over her head. Then, he took off his white robe with one hand and gently draped it over her body. There was a faint orchid fragrance on her clothes. He was very much like the gentleman he was. "You don't have to be like this. I'll accept you as my disciple." The man's voice was filled with compassion. Wei Wei Bai raised her head in surprise. There was pure worship and adoration on her beautiful face. Direct and fearless emotions appeared on Wei Wei Bai's face without any concealment. The man said gently, "I am no trace of snow. You will follow me from now on. I will teach you swordsmanship so that you can take revenge." Wei Wei Bai stared at him with a burning passion in her eyes. She grabbed the corner of his clothes tightly, as if she had seen her savior. Master. No trace of Snow's lips curled up, revealing a gentle and gratified smile. His entire temperament was pure and holy. This feeling of being wholeheartedly trusted was really good. When he obtained all of her trust and adoration, he would personally betray her and shatter all of her hopes. It must be very delicious. Without the notification of the favorability level, Wei Wei Bai could only make a simple judgment of no trace of Snow's feelings. He should be excited, crazy, perverted, mentally twisted and shameless. She silently ridiculed him. Then, like a chick seeing her partner for the first time, she worshipped him like a parent. Wei Wei Bai felt that no trace of Snow liked to play with people's hearts. She trusted and worshipped him so that he would put his thoughts on her and slowly think about the future. No trace of Snow suddenly reached out and held her bloodied hand. His gentle palm had a comforting gentleness. He turned around and pulled her into his embrace. Wei Wei Bai was startled and looked up with some fear. No trace of Snow only gently placed his hand on her shoulder, pressing the lotus under his palm. A wave of warmth entered her body, warming her up immediately. Wei Wei Bai's eyes showed gratitude. She was a little embarrassed. "Thank you, benefactor." No trace of Snow's smile deepened. He said gently, "It's time to call me master. In the future, you will follow me." Wei Wei Bai nervously lowered her head, as if she was a little helpless and shy. Then, she softly nodded. She didn't seem to notice that no trace of Snow's gaze was cold and interesting as he looked at her. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head. Her gaze was just as cold. She was just short of rolling her eyes. Chapter 1271. The Devil Sect was destroyed, and the leader of the Devil Sect was missing. Those righteous people of the martial arts world originally came to take revenge, but they saw the Devil Sect being destroyed. It was really satisfying. Only a bright magnolia was left at the scene, and it was a symbol of a certain person. It was said that the man always wore a black mask with a magnolia pattern on it. He was almost invincible with his long sword. No one knew where he came from. No one knew when he disappeared. No one even knew his name. Because he always left magnolia flowers at the scene of a crime, everyone gave him the nickname of White Magnolia. In the martial arts ranking list, he and the leader of the martial arts world, No Trace of Snow, were both ranked first. His character was incomparably evil, both good and evil, and it all depended on his mood. Sometimes he could destroy a group of bad guys, and sometimes he would run to kill the righteous people of the martial arts world. He did everything according to his mood. So the people of the martial arts world did not see him as a righteous person, but as a member of the Devil Sect. So even if the Devil Sect was destroyed, those righteous people would not be happy. Instead, it would add another mark to his sinful book. Wei Wei Bai casually counted the poison needles, listening to the system's lively Jianghu gossip. That damned masked magnolia. Wasn't he the leader of the martial arts world? No Trace of Snow? His name was already sissy enough, but even his nickname was Sissy. Wei Wei Bai sat barefooted by the window, 1 foot outside the window. Outside the window was a garden, and her toes even touched the blooming Chinese roses. The silver bell on her ankle jingled. Suddenly, she seemed to have noticed something, and immediately looked up happily. At the end of the flowers, a slender moon-white figure slowly appeared. His black hair was tied into a neat bun with a jade hairpin, and his fair and handsome face had a distinct cold arrogance, but his deep dark eyes were soft and affectionate. It was as if he was looking at everyone as if he was looking at the person he loved. Wei Wei Bai threw away the poison needle in her hand and jumped out of the window. She stepped on those Chinese roses. It didn't matter if the soles of her feet were pricked by thorns. Her eyes were full of pure worship and admiration. She rushed in front of No Trace of Snow and smiled brightly. "Master, I already know how to hide needles." No Trace of Snow lowered his head and saw that her childlike eyes were filled with his shadow. Her thick black hair casually draped over her back, fluttering as she lightly ran. He was like a child who didn't understand the evils of the world. This kind of person should be especially desperate when betrayed. No Trace of Snow revealed a trace of a gentle smile, as if he was looking at his most precious child. He reached out his hand and gently brushed aside the loose strands of hair by her cheek. "Wei Wei is very powerful. When Master was your age, he didn't know anything. Wei Wei by... When you were my age, didn't you already learn how to kill and destroy the evidence? Don't make yourself sound so pure and innocent, you psychopathic murderer." She was spitting at him in her heart, but her face was full of bashfulness. "How can I compare to Master? Master, look!" She suddenly pointed behind him. Shui Wuhan was caught off guard and looked back. As a result, a cold needle suddenly pierced into his neck. His hand, as if it had eyes, caught the needle that attacked her and snatched it away with force. Then he calmly turned back, his smile unchanged. "Still thinking of sneaking up on Master?" Wei Wei bit her lip with a face of annoyance. Her pale lips were bitten into a bright red color, and she glared at him, seemingly annoyed. Transmigration system. "Prince Charming, come here." Transmigration system. "Prince Charming, come here." / transmigration system. "Prince Charming, come here." Transmigration system. "Prince Charming, come here." Next time you open the bookshelf, you will see it. Chapter 1272. She seemed to feel embarrassed that she had been exposed. No Trace of Snow reached out and passed the needle to her. "You didn't put poison in it?" Wei Wei suddenly reached out and snatched the needle. Her beautiful eyes glanced at him coquettishly. "Who knows how to put poison in it? You're my master. I'll poison anyone but you." Her face was filled with all kinds of emotions. If she liked him, she liked him. If she was dissatisfied, she was dissatisfied. Her admiration for him was obvious. But she was also very adorable. No Trace of Snow's eyes darkened and he smiled. "I'm doing this for your own good. Your needle should be dipped in poison at all times. Jianghu people are sinister. You don't have a foundation in martial arts. I won't be able to teach you advanced martial arts or sword techniques in time. I can only teach you poison and concealed weapons to protect yourself." Wei Wei pouted in dissatisfaction. She crossed her arms behind her back, slightly tilted her face, and stared at him with a pair of clear eyes. "Master," her voice was soft and coquettish. "I'll never use poison against you, Master, and I still hope that you can teach me sword techniques. I want to be as good as you in the future." No Trace of Snow's smile became softer. His tone was kind. "Once you learn how to use poison needles, you'll be as good as me in the future." Wei Wei snorted. "You only know how to brush me off. When can I get my revenge?" After saying that, she turned around and left. Her long skirt fluttered with her movements. Her every move was so lively and full of life. No Trace of Snow looked at her indifferently, but she suddenly stopped in her tracks, as if she was hesitating about something. It was as if she was thinking of some evil idea. Then he saw her tilt her face and reveal a sly smile. She took a step forward and deliberately fell to the ground. "Ouch!" she shouted exaggeratedly. "It hurts." The system was expressionless. "Host, your acting skills have regressed 10,000 times. Wei Wei said, "That's exactly what I want. You have to deliberately let others see through your acting." No Trace of Snow, that pervert, liked her pure and unpretentious nature, as well as her actions to monopolize his line of sight. The more she cared about him, the happier he was. "Fuck off." Sure enough, he saw her fall in such an exaggerated manner, as well as her obviously deceptive groans of pain. No Trace of Snow sighed helplessly. His footsteps were as graceful as flowing water as he arrived in front of her. He had already reached out to pull her up. However, Wei Wei Bai raised her eyes. Her eyes were round, but the ends of her eyes were long and narrow, making her look even more charming. She smiled triumphantly and her voice softened. "Master, it hurts." No trace of Snow's hand gently tugged at her wrist, and just as he was about to use his strength to pull her up. However, when he heard her words, he only paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. His expression was still gentle and affectionate, but there was a dark light in the depths of his eyes. He said softly, "Where does it hurt? I don't think you fell hard." Wei Wei Bai was not embarrassed at all from being exposed. Instead, she tilted her head and smiled charmingly. Then she raised her leg. Her beautiful calves were exposed, and the gauzy dress slid down to her knees as she raised her leg. Her pink toes were stained with some dust, which made them look even more white and tender. Her calves were as delicate and smooth as jade, and there were a few rose thorns on the soles of her feet. A little drop of blood came out from the thorns, and it was so gorgeous that it burned people's eyes. Wei Wei Bai's eyebrows hid a gorgeous beauty. She seemed innocent but also seemed to be doing it on purpose. Chapter 1273. Her delicate toes lightly tapped no trace of Snow's chest. The blood on her feet stained his moon-white robe a little red. It was eye-catching and stunning. The bells on her ankles were ringing seductively. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her fingers. Her posture was languid and seductive. She curled her ink-black hair in a seductive manner. "Master, do you think I'm seriously injured?" She was supposed to be innocent, but in the blink of an eye, she turned into a seductive beauty. No trace of Snow froze for a moment. Then he suddenly reached out and picked her up. He gracefully leaped onto the window. Then he stepped into the house. He put Wei Wei Bai on the table. Then he stretched out his fingers, held her feet, and quickly pulled out her rose thorns. Then he took out a bottle of medicine from his sleeve and sprinkled some on her. His every move was so calm and gentle, but it didn't give people any fanciful thoughts. He was a true gentleman. Even his expression was as if he was looking at his daughter. He completely ignored Wei Wei Bai's seductive posture. The seductive look on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared. It was replaced by annoyance and anger. She lifted her feet, but no trace of Snow held her down. "Okay, don't always lift your skirt. Didn't the adults teach you that it's easy to catch a cold?" Although his expression was calm, his tone was still a little hesitant. It seemed that he was a little embarrassed to say this to her. Wei Wei Bai smiled. "Master, you're so good to me." She relied wholeheartedly and seduced him faintly. Sometimes she was as innocent and childish as a child. Sometimes she was like a seductive spirit. Her every move was seductive. No trace of Snow accepted her at first only because of the flower on her shoulder. But after getting along with her for a short period of time, he found that she simply gave him a big surprise. In the past, he had met many interesting people. But after getting along for a long time, it became boring. Only Wei Wei Bai was different every day, giving him a huge sense of novelty. Seriously, it made him look forward to her relying on him as she grew up. When she was at her best, he would then feel the pain of destroying her. Wei Wei Bai noticed that his fingers were trembling, although it was only for a moment. However, she knew that this pervert was having another intracranial orgasm. Wei Wei Bai lazily lowered her eyes, but her tone was filled with cute expectation. "Master, can you show me how to use your sword? Look at how I learned how to hide needles in just 3 days, and I even finished reading the hidden weapon manual you gave me. I worked so hard, you have to reward me." No trace of Snow released her foot and said in a helpless tone, "You only know how to torment your master." Wei Wei Bai's face was a little blushed, but she acted like a little girl. "I like the way master holds the sword. Even if I can't learn it, it's good to be able to see it." No trace of Snow sighed. "Once you're done watching, learn how to use concealed weapons properly. All right?" Wei Wei Bai jumped off the table and immediately took a sword from the wall. No trace of Snow's sword was in her room. She was afraid that he would regret it when he went back to get it, so she gave him an ordinary sword. No trace of Snow was not picky, and his every move showed that he was a good master who doted on his disciple. He walked out of the door and came to the door, but Wei Wei Bai had already excitedly ran to the window. She supported her chin with both hands and leaned against the window, eagerly looking at him. No trace of Snow's soft and affectionate expression disappeared, and his white robe suddenly flew up. The sword in his hand flew out of the scabbard, and his slender fingers grasped the sword hilt like lightning, and a cold killing intent emerged from the sword. Fast address of the full text. https://www.sashu.com//fast. Chapter 1274. Then I'll go learn the secret weapon book, master. Without waiting for No Trace of Snow to respond, she immediately reached out and closed the window. Outside the window, the loving smile on No Trace of Snow's face slowly disappeared. He coldly raised his hand and wiped his cheeks. There was a familiar fragrance in his nose, which was left on him by Wei Wei Bai. No Trace of Snow frowned slightly. He pursed his thin lips as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, he turned around and left. But Wei Wei Bai was nagging the system in the room. Without the favorability notification, I didn't even know the effect just now. Her current personality was normal, naive and childish, a vicious and scheming girl. Xue Wuhan must have known that she had grown up in the demonic sect since she was a child. No matter how naive she would definitely be cruel and unscrupulous. The original owner was definitely not a good person. Wei Wei Bai was just continuing the original owner's character. However, she didn't know if the original owner was seductive or not. Anyway, she had made up her mind to seduce No Trace of Snow until he knelt down and called her Baba. The system said, "It's okay. When the favorability reaches 0, it will automatically remind you." Wei Wei Bai said, "Is it still negative now?" The system said, "Don't try to trick me. Rules are rules, I can't tell you what the favorability is." Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "Trick my ass. There's no notification for the favorability, so No Trace of Snow's favorability is negative." Was there a need to tell it? Wei Wei Bai looked at the secret weapon book again. She needed strength to seduce people. Wait until she became a martial arts genius. So he hung Xue Wuhan up like a river crab. Who asked him to be a pervert? Who asked him to be sick? This kind of person deserved a beating. After the system knew Wei Wei Bai's thoughts, it only had one comment. He could dream even better. After all, he didn't need money to dream. This was because the male lead of this world had an abnormally high martial strength. He was simply the number one in this world and could not be shaken. Wei Wei Bai ate and played happily. While she was at it, she played pranks on the servants, causing them to be in chaos. She portrayed a mischievous little cutie in a vivid manner. As for No Trace of Snow, ever since that kiss, he had been in a hurry to see her. When he came in the morning, he finally stayed a little longer. He said that he would help her investigate the culprit behind the massacre of her family. A trace of fear flashed across Wei Wei Bai's face. It seemed that she didn't want No Trace of Snow to investigate. However, No Trace of Snow seemed to be thick-skinned and did not notice her expression at all. Instead, it seemed more like a malicious intent. He began to interrogate her about her background. Wei Wei Bai awkwardly avoided this question and fled. When she was running away, a dark malice finally appeared on No Trace of Snow's face. Was she so afraid of him knowing her true colors? Wei Wei Bai had a strange look on her face. She touched her face and thought, "What do you think of my acting? A pitiful little girl who is afraid of being found out about her demon sect identity? System, I think you're more like the villain." Wei Wei Bai, "You don't understand my beauty. It's okay, No Trace of Snow will soon appreciate my beauty." She only had 8 months left. She didn't have the time to play a master's affectionate game with No Trace of Snow. She had to do something more intense. Otherwise, how could she gain heart points? The more she was afraid of something, the more No Trace of Snow would do. For example, he would investigate her identity as a member of the demon sect and accuse her with a sorrowful face. He would break off their master-disciple relationship. This was a good thing. She would make some accidents when the time came. She would see if she could gain some heart points. / comma. Chapter 1275. No trace of Snow's expression changed, but he followed her strength and grabbed her wrist. He snatched the poison needles from her hand and threw her back onto the bed. Wei Wei Bai hit the bed, feeling a little dizzy. She looked up and saw Shui Wuhan holding a few poisonous needles in his hand. He looked down at them and then laughed softly. "You're so cute. You don't have any martial arts skills. You want to kill me with the agility of an ordinary person. You're so bold and stupid." Wei Wei Bai's expression did not change. Instead, she smiled. She was not as obedient as she was in front of her master. Her body was enchanting, and she was lying on her side in a seductive posture. She supported her forehead with her hand and said casually, "Who said I want to kill you? I don't know where Big Brother is, but your martial arts skills are really good. This little girl admires you." No trace of Snow looked up and saw the charm in her every move. Was this the saintess of the demonic sect who was groomed to be the next saintess? Thinking about what the saintess of the demonic sect was for, he did not know where a surge of irritation came from. Most of the saintesses of the demonic sect did not know martial arts, but they were proficient in the art of seduction. They basically made a living by seducing men. The more dissatisfied he was, the gentler his tone became. "Why are you so inquisitive about my identity? Do you want to repay me with your body?" Wei Wei Bai's long and beautiful eyes faintly glanced at him. A few traces of coldness flashed in her eyes, but her smile was charming. "Okay, if you are better than my master, then I will worship you as my master. Or..." Her voice was a little hoarse, deliberately evoking a man's deepest desire. She said slowly, word by word, "It's good to be your woman." She looked like a complete seductress, but the masked man in front of her could not help but laugh. His smile was indescribably cold. "Oh, if you worship me as your master, then what about your master?" Wei Wei Bai seemed a little perplexed. She frowned and actually looked a little pitiful. "That's true. My master is very good to me. I am a little embarrassed to kick him away. Then I will be your woman." This answer was even more infuriating than before. She was not reserved like a woman and had no morals. In front of him, she even knew how to pretend to be obedient. If he did not come here wearing a mask, he would not know that she was actually so unrestrained. His woman. Did she really know what it meant? Bai Weiwei simply felt that it wasn't enough to add oil to the fire. She stretched out her finger, picked up a strand of long hair, and lazily twirled it around. She was charming and seductive at the same time. "I know everything. I've seen all kinds of positions for men and women. I know how to make men happy." System. The host was no longer a little white flower and had become a little demoness. He was not used to it. Shui Wuhan stood in the dark. His expression couldn't be seen clearly because of the mask on his face. Only his thin lips were excessively red, which gave him a kind of devilish charm. Calm. Before Bai Weiwei could react, he had already appeared at the bedside. Then his tall and slender body slowly bent over. He extended a white jade-like finger and placed it on her toggle. "How do you want to be happy? Spring is short. Why don't you let me experience it now?" Weiwei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of dark trembling. It seemed like fear, but she quickly suppressed it and took the initiative to reach out and grab the corner of his clothes. She smiled sweetly. Her thick eyelashes trembled, and her pink face was tinged with a faint blush. Chapter 1276. When No Trace of Snow heard this, he laughed instead of being angry. In the blink of an eye, he had already clasped his hands on her shoulders and felt her body tremble. What a cute reaction. She was so scared, yet she still tried so hard to seduce him. Weiwei Bai bit her lip. Her breathing became chaotic. She hugged the blanket tightly, the fear in her eyes exposed. "Don't come over," I won't let you go. No trace of Snow's voice rose slightly, his tone indescribably evil. Tear my mouth. Then you won't be able to kiss me. She was so angry that her face turned red. She gritted her teeth and scolded. You shameless, ugly freak, wearing a mask all day long. Your face must have been covered up long ago. No wonder you don't dare to meet people. You're a rapist in the middle of the night because no woman likes you. So your heart is bitter. You can only be a pervert. Those seductive gestures just now, they were all gone. She was just short of putting her hands on her hips and turning into an explosive little shrew. Her voice was as pleasant as a bell, but her scolding could destroy one's heart and lungs. She really had so many expressions. How could she change so many expressions? No trace of Snow's smile deepened. It was as if he was looking at an insensible child throwing a tantrum, completely unconcerned. Wei Wei Bai was tired of scolding. Seeing the other party's indifferent expression, she bit her lip in frustration and glared at him in dissatisfaction. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes, and a mischievous malice appeared in her eyes. No trace of Snow was already on guard, and could even easily seal her acupoints to restrain her. But to see how many flowers she could come up with, he let her jump around. She suddenly stretched out her hands, and the blanket slid off her body. Her clothes were mostly open, revealing the tender red belly band and snow-white neck. Her skin was so beautiful that it was shining. Xue Wuhan glanced at her. Then she had already pounced over. Her soft body carried the unique, clean fragrance of a young girl. She directly crashed into his arms. No trace of Snow suddenly wanted to retreat, thinking that she was going to attack him again. But he suddenly froze. Her lips actually pressed against his thin lips. Her fragrant breath wrapped around him, as if even his soul could be seduced away by her. Her movements were jerky and passionate as she recklessly barged into his mouth. No trace of Snow had never encountered such an unexpected attack before. He was even dazed for a moment and didn't know how to react. And this moment of absent-mindedness gave her an opportunity. No trace of Snow felt a pain in his mouth. His eyes suddenly became clear, and he raised his hand to slap Wei Wei Bai on the top of her head. They were going to film it well. She must be dead. Wei Wei Bai was not a pushover either. She had long been prepared for his counterattack. Relying on her soft body, she directly leaned back, hooked her feet on the blanket, and threw it at his face. No trace of Snow's mouth was bleeding, and the tip of his tongue was entangled with the needle that she had used to attack him. He did not allow her to insert the needle deep into his throat. If he hadn't rolled it up in time, his throat was probably crushed by the needles. It was really impossible to guard against. How long had it been since he had suffered such an unexpected injury? She didn't even know martial arts. Just by relying on her soft body without any internal strength, she was actually able to avoid his actions. No trace of Snow tasted the blood in his mouth. It was not poisonous. He pulled open the blanket, but he saw that Wei Wei Bai was still buttoning her clothes and looking at him with a very happy smile. You're poisoned. I want you to listen to me in the future. She smiled like a little fox that had succeeded, and her beautiful eyes were full of pride. No trace of Snow reached out his finger and gently touched the blood at the corner of his mouth. His cold eyes had a few traces of a twisted smile. Then he said unhurriedly, "What do you want me to listen to you?" The download address is at https://www.sashu.com the comma. Chapter 1277. There was still a needle wound in his mouth. If the needle was poisoned, she did not care to bite him. She did not want to expose herself. Did she want to tell others that she was a liar? Smart and naive. Vicious and bad in a frank way. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be trying to open her eyes. Her eyelashes were trembling, but she could not speak. No trace of Snow put her back on the bed. He smiled before she fainted. I'll keep your identity so no trace of Snow won't know who you are, but you'll have to call me Master in the future. Is this a deal? Wei Wei Bai's breathing gradually stabilized. She had completely fainted. No trace of snow pulled the blanket over and covered her. He took off the mask on his face and looked at Wei Wei Bai with a smile. He looked at her for a while, and his tone became casual. I wonder what kind of expression you'll have when you find out that your master is a hypocrite. I'm looking forward to it. He was looking forward to the day she broke down. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she felt comfortable all over. She said, "Did the favorability increase, Tongzi?" The system said, "Don't try to trick me. I won't say anything." Wei Wei Bai, who failed to trick the system, did not look ashamed at all. She said, "Where's Sissy Snow?" The system said, "Other than the name Sissy, there's nothing sissy about him." It turned to look at the male lead and said, "He pretended to come from outside." Wei Wei Bai nodded thoughtfully. She said, "The favorability increase is not ideal, it's still not 0. Negative favorability would only sound when it was 0, 50, and 100. Until now, she had not received a single notification. Xue Wuhan was really a black-hearted rotten stone that was hard to chew. How could someone be so perverted? Wei Wei Bai yawned, then got up and took out the book on concealed weapons and the needles. Then, without even combing her hair or wearing her shoes, she smashed the room. After she was done, she sat on the table barefooted. She took the needle and threw it at the begonia beside the bed. It was as if he had a grudge against someone. Her face was frosty and her eyes were ruthless. Her eyes were red and filled with grievance. When No Trace of Snow walked in, he saw that one of the girl's feet was dangling under the table. Her snow-white ankles were adorned with bells that jingled as she moved. Her dress was in a mess, and her long hair hung down to her waist. She held a needle in her hand and stabbed it into the flower. Her bright and tender face was innocently tinged with vicious resentment. No Trace of Snow deliberately stepped heavily on the ground. Wei Wei Bai immediately turned around, unable to retract the ruthlessness on her face. Instinctively, she threw the needle in her hand at him. No Trace of Snow calmly raised his hand and caught the needle she threw at him. He frowned. "What's wrong, Wei Wei?" When Wei Wei Bai saw that it was No Trace of Snow, panic flashed across her face. The ruthlessness in her eyes was replaced by uneasiness. Then, she immediately revealed a brilliant smile and pretended to be innocent and tender. "Master, you're back. I missed you so much." With that, she jumped off the table and the bells rang. She shouldn't have messed up the room. She directly rushed in front of No Trace of Snow and said with a smile, "Master, did you bring me something good again?" No Trace of Snow looked at her and found that she couldn't even put on her clothes properly. He lovingly and gently reached out to straighten her clothes, looking like a father looking at his daughter. "What's wrong? Are you in a bad mood? Who bullied my little disciple?" Chapter 1278. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of twisted hatred flashed through her eyes. But very quickly, she hid it away, leaving behind only innocence. She complained unhappily, "Isn't it because Master has been too cold recently? Is it because he saw me running around and regretted taking me in as a disciple?" No Trace of Snow said helplessly, "Aren't I investigating the massacre of your family?" Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened, and her face turned pale. She forced a smile. "Really? Then what did you find out?" No Trace of Snow saw that she was clenching her hands tightly, and her palms were probably sweating from nervousness. There was a moment of joy in his smile, but of course, it was replaced by a doting and gentle smile. "I found out that the demon sect was destroyed." Her breath stopped, and her fingers began to tremble. No Trace of Snow paused and then said slowly, "Your family happened to be near the demon sect, so the murderer destroyed your family, and you were the only one who escaped." Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment, and seemed to be at a loss. Family near the demon sect, what was that? She was clearly from the demon sect. Suddenly, she remembered what the man said to her last night. If she called him master, he would help her keep the secret. Wei Wei Bai's expression was complicated. She wanted to tell others about her obvious acting skills. She was very conflicted, very uncomfortable, and very secretive. The host did not want to comment on her regressive acting skills. After Wei Wei Bai finished playing the role of a conflicted disciple, she received a perverted look of happiness from No Trace of Snow, and then she retracted her expression in satisfaction. Then she quietly heaved a sigh of relief and reluctantly showed a sad expression. Yes, my family was killed by that demon. I only know that he was wearing a mask, and he wanted to kill me. These words made her truly fearful for a moment. No Trace of Snow reached out and patted her shoulder, as if to comfort her. It's okay. I've already found out who he is. Wei Wei Bai suddenly showed a sinister expression. Who is it? This expression was too obvious. No Trace of Snow pretended not to see it, but he knew that she really wanted revenge. The saintess of the demonic sect was her mother, and her father was one of the guardians of the demonic sect. She grew up in the demonic sect and treated it as her home. Coupled with the education she had received since young, she had developed the vicious nature of the devil sect. Revenge for the smallest grievance. Revenge for all enmity. No Trace of Snow sighed. It's the White Magnolia. What a D*MN nickname. Wei Wei Bai resisted the urge to complain. Her expression was a little strange. No Trace of Snow thought she was sad and comforted her. I will avenge you. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said loudly. I want to report it myself. I must catch that White Magnolia, and then... Thousands of cuts, all kinds of torture. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she did not say it out loud. It was as if she was afraid of scaring No Trace of Snow. No Trace of Snow looked innocent and calm, as if he did not know what she was going to say next. His expression was gentle, and his white robe was holy and elegant. He looked like a savior as he said to her, It's okay. Master will help you. Wei Wei Bai looked up. The gratitude and infatuation in her eyes were obvious. Her voice trembled. Master, will you always be so good to me? No Trace of Snow said, What are you thinking? As long as you are my disciple, I will be good to you. Wei Wei Bai's eyes reddened. She reached out and threw herself into his arms, crying out loud, Master, you must not abandon me. No Trace of Snow reached out and stroked her back, comforting her. What are you worrying about at such a young age? How could Master abandon you? Master is still waiting for you to show your beautiful face of breaking down in pain. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She grabbed the clothes on his back tightly, as if she was holding a treasure. She buried her head in his chest, her voice full of fierceness. Master promised, you are not allowed to abandon me. If you break your promise, I will lock Master up. She fiercely threatened. She was like a child who did not know how to be possessive. But this possessive desire made No Trace of Snow stare, and then his smile deepened. A sense of joy that he had never felt before, and a sense of novelty surged up. And Wei Wei Bai heard a voice that she had not heard in a long time. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Wei Bai, I never thought that Master would be such a pervert, actually liking captivity play. Transmigration system. Male God. Come here. Download the https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system. Male God. Come here. Download the full article. https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system. Male God. Come here. Download the full article. https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system. Male God. Come here. Download the full article. https://m. Sashu.com transmigration system. Male God. Come here. Chapter 1279. Wei Wei Bai was tired from crying, and she did not sleep well last night. She cried and cried until she fell asleep in No Trace of Snow's arms. Xue Wuhan was a perverted man, but he was actually a gentleman. He would never do anything to her. That was why Wei Wei Bai hugged him calmly, rubbing against his chest as she slept peacefully. Then the system saw a scene that stung its eyes. No trace of snow lowered his eyes, his gaze dark and strange. His snow-white finger gently rubbed against her lips. There was even a trace of her tears on his lips. The slightly cold moisture made him silent for a while. Then he slowly put his finger in his mouth. The system who was secretly eating the bread. No trace of Snow's face softened, and he laughed softly. What a cute child! That eerie tone made it feel like it had entered some strange and dark hell, with a chilly wind blowing. The system trembled, and hurriedly ate 2 more bread to calm itself down. This crazy male lead, this poisonous host. The system once again felt like it was a clear stream between them. Wei Wei Bai ate and slept well, and the speed at which she learned poison needles was like a rocket. That was because she bought the hidden weapon talent. The cheapest one was 10 days of life. After all, she needed to maintain the image of a talented little demoness, and not a silly little cutie. How could she not even learn poison needles and hidden weapons? Wouldn't that be a violation of her image? To Wei Wei Bai, a violation of her image was unbearable. She felt like she had an obsessive-compulsive disorder set up by someone. Either she did not act or she would leap to the top of the world. She was such a perfect little fairy. Don't worship her too much. Wei Wei Bai looked sad. I'm still too good. The system? Wei Wei Bai. Actually, I still prefer the image of a silly little white flower. The system said, your hobbies are really unique. Wei Wei Bai. The little white flower doesn't know anything and everyone is used to it. That's why the little white flower persona saves money. The system thought about it and felt that it made sense. At least little white flower didn't need to buy talent goods. Wei Wei Bai was casually chatting with the system while she flipped her wrist and moved her feet. She was practicing her concealed weapon martial arts. No trace of Snow was a freak, but his persona was just as perfect as hers. He was the leader of Wulin's alliance with 0 negative reviews, and he was the pride of God who was the best in martial arts in the game. Bright as the moon, floating in the air like an immortal. No matter what, everyone would think that he was the righteous one, except for the fact that he was too good at pretending. His righteous face really took advantage of him. One had to know that people were all superficial, and no one in the ancient and modern times could escape this terrible curse. When they saw someone with good looks, they couldn't help but become a bootlicker. The system suddenly said, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai immediately straightened her expression and instantly changed her proper but not aesthetically pleasing posture. She flipped her wrist enchantingly, but the expression on her face was still that of naivety. Her dress swayed like lotus petals, but the poisonous needle on her finger was sharp and insidious. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind the flowers, and the poisonous needle flew into his eye socket. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. She rushed forward, pulled her satin belt from her waist, and threw it fiercely, wanting to wrap around her poisonous needle. But it was too late. She wasn't fast enough and couldn't touch it. That figure, however, gently caught the poison needle between his fingers. He was not affected by this unexpected attack at all. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.